IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Tuesday, September 10th, and we got a lot to talk about, everybody. That's Trevor Trowbridge, my dude, and we are going to talk about a lot of things, Trevor. Normally, Tuesday is intro the opponent day, but, we're going to take out a page out of Notre Dame's flawed fit game plan from last week, and we're just going to not practice like we normally practice. Fortunately for us, it won't have any outcome on this weekend's game, but we're going to talk about Notre Dame and Purdue from the standpoint of a few different aspects of the game. So we're not going to just kind of rehash Northern Illinois. We're past Northern Illinois. It's time to talk about what's next for Notre Dame. And instead of diving into Purdue, because honestly, I'm sure a lot of you don't really care. You care, but there's a lot more important than just necessarily Purdue specifically. Here's what they do offensively, defensively. I'll dive into that stuff tomorrow. But we're going to talk today about what this means for Notre Dame. And here's what we're not going to do. And we're not going to do it in the chat either. We're going to have some constructive football conversations. We're not going to have the fire this guy, bench that guy, childish pot shots at players. We're going to be grown-ups in this chat. And we're going to be grown-ups in this show, and we're going to talk about real aspects of what this game means, Trevor. We're going to talk about what's at stake for Notre Dame against Purdue. What does this game mean for Notre Dame against Purdue? And what does it, what's at stake for Notre Dame? And there's a lot more at stake than people think, at least in one direction, in my opinion. And maybe actually people do know that, and we just haven't got a chance to talk about it yet because we're so pissed off about what happened Saturday. Then we're going to talk about quarterback. And we're going to talk about what Notre Dame needs to do to find answers at quarterback. And what we're not going to do, and I'm already knocking people out of the chat, we're not going to just come in here and say this guy sucks, that guy sucks, bench it. That's not what we're doing. We're going to have actual football conversations. If you want just flame throwing, then go somewhere else. Okay? We're gonna actually be grown-ups today. But that doesn't mean that we have to say everything is rainbow and sunshines. There's a difference between saying it's okay, guys. Put your everything is happy caps on, and we're all ready to rock and roll. And so that's not what we're doing. But we're also not going to be those. We're not going to do that stuff. Okay, we're going to talk about they got to find answers at quarterback, because what we've seen the first two games of quarterback outside of a couple series here and there against Texas A&M is just not good enough. So we're going to figure out what they need to do there. We're going to talk about there's really three options that Notre Dame has. And we'll break down each one. And then we'll wrap things up with a look at what do we want to see from Notre Dame this weekend, Purdue, that tells us they've at least taken a step in the right direction. That'll be at the end of the show. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm looking forward to it. Trevor's looking forward to it. I think you and I probably talked about this for like an hour last night. And then, obviously a little bit before the show. So we're going to get into it today, Trevor, with this breakdown of what to expect from Notre Dame Purdue, what's at stake for Notre Dame Purdue, and then we will talk quarterback.
Love it. Excited to get into it. There's a lot to unpack after really what's happened the last 72 hours, call it. So pumped to be a part of it today and dive into what we need to see and where the team goes from here.
So let's begin with a discussion about what's at stake this weekend for Purdue. Because it's actually in my belief, it's a very interesting game, because I don't know that there's a lot that Notre Dame can do this weekend, Trevor, and to say, hey, look, they righted the ship. Everything is good. It's all good. And there's also aspects of this where you have to say, but there's obviously a lot at stake if they lose. And here's why I say that, because when I look at the positives, it's okay. So let's say they come out and just rip Purdue up this weekend. Let's say the offense figures it out and they come out and they play like the team we all thought they were, and they go on the road and beat Purdue by 27 points. Okay. We've seen this before, right? Like, we've been here, done that. We've seen this before. That doesn't mean it's not a good thing if Notre Dame does that. It's a great thing, and we'll talk about why that's a great thing in a little bit. But that doesn't make everyone necessary. It'll calm things down a bit. But the whole point is, the frustration is you do look great so often and then look like that. And I don't know that going on the road and beating a Purdue team that's, I think is improved, but coming off a 4-8 season and a new head coach in his second year who'd never been a head coach before, beating that team doesn't necessarily say, all right, you figured it out, you've rectified the problem. No, we need to see that they don't continue to have those type of what the heck was that moments. And that's the big thing. But it is at least a step in the right direction, Trevor, from a positive standpoint. From a negative standpoint, you lose this game. I don't know how you recover from that if you're Marcus Freeman. So in one instance, it's not necessarily about, hey, win big and everything is good, or win and everything is good. It's not that, but to the opposite side is you lose this football game and you could be going down a path that I'm not sure you can recover from.
The way that I look at this game is it is the first step in a multi-step recovery process from what happened on Saturday. If Notre Dame comes out and beats Purdue like how we think that they should and how we believe that they would have last Saturday, to me that raises even more questions about the level of consistency of this football program. But for me, looking at this game, it's going to be almost about tailoring my expectations. Unfortunately, stuff doesn't get corrected as quickly as it falls off. And I think that's something a lot of Notre Dame fans are familiar with. The way I look at it is almost like if you're trying to get back in shape, you put on weight or whatever pretty quick. Takes a while for it to come back off. And that's kind of how I look at Notre Dame in the rest of this season. Because as awesome as it would be to come out and watch Riley Leonard have 4 total touchdowns and Notre Dame handles business and they're getting the young guys in quickly like we thought this 3-game stretch was going to look like for them, it's more about starting to course correct and starting to take a step in the right direction of where this program needs to go to finish out the season on a strong note. Because to your point, Bryan, on the flip side of that coin, I don't want to take extremes here, but you drop this game to Purdue, you are looking at what does the rest of this season mean for the team in South Bend, right? So that is, in my mind, what is at stake from a higher level view. And like we've touched on, we'll dive into what that's going to look like and some of the more granular things that we'll be looking for on Saturday.
So let's talk about how important it is for Notre Dame to come out and play well, though, right? Like, here's the thing. What's at stake on Saturday? Beating Purdue does not mean everything is fixed. But I do think after what happened Saturday, Trevor, this team needs a boost in confidence. I think this team needs so the answers will come down the road about whether or not they've fixed what happened Saturday and then what happened against Louisville last year and Clemson last year and Stanford the year before and Marshall the year before, where they just didn't answer, right? Like, they just didn't show up in those games. But it is something that can then be a setup to then be get them to the point where they do have it fixed. Because again, if you lose this game, you don't recover from this. And now we're starting to get into okay, you just lost to Northern Illinois and Purdue, and you still got Miami of Ohio, Louisville, an improved Stanford team, Georgia Tech, Florida State, Virginia. I mean, Navy. Everyone can beat you now. And now you get into I've had people say this could end up being 2016, and my first thought is God, stop. Can we just stop? Can we not over? And then I'm like, but hold on a second. Okay, it's that game does not equal 2016, but a loss here does. And because it snowballs, it tells me that this team got broken mentally and emotionally by Northern Illinois. Bouncing back with a good, it doesn't have to be a great performance, just a good performance against Purdue tells me that at least emotionally and mentally and confidence-wise, this team has bounced back well. That's very important for short-term. Looking at it from a micro standpoint, it is good for them short-term to be able to go out and say, hey, listen, we've righted that ship for this season. At least for now, we've bounced back from that. That game didn't snowball into a loss, sort of like Ohio State led into, I think, Marshall in 2022. I think losing to Ohio State in 2023 led into kind of a couple poor performances against Duke and Louisville. This team has not always handled those type of things well. They did bounce back from the loss to Clemson well last year, and they did bounce back from the loss to Louisville last year, which is further evidence of why a big win doesn't mean it's all good, because they bounced back against USC last year, but then 3 weeks later went and laid an egg against Clemson, right? And that's what we're trying to, this program needs to get past. And so when I look at it, it's just, you know, you need that first step, though, to fix the macro down the road. You do need that first step, because that first step is going to tell us where this team is at mentally and emotionally coming out of this loss.
Totally. It's about sharing your expectations for what this game actually does mean, right? Much like last week, I do believe that Notre Dame is fully capable of beating Purdue. However, because of the results of last week, now we have to look at every single opponent and say, well, is it as much of a guaranteed win as we thought before? And as a team in a position like Notre Dame, if I'm Purdue, I smell blood in the water. I'm looking at this and I'm saying, yo, this is an injured team emotionally coming into our house who is at a pivotal point in their season going into week 3, which is not a spot that you want to be in. Marcus Freeman preaches all the time, one play, one life, and challenge everything. And now that is more true than ever. And I think I fall into the category of a lot of people that want to see that go beyond the coaches speak. We need to see it on the field. And against Texas A&M, you saw it on the field. You saw Marcus Freeman fire his team up, and they were ready. And we talked about it so much in the postgame show that your players are a byproduct of how you lead them. And I think there was a reflection of that on Saturday. And I don't want to open up that can of worms because we got enough of our beefs out in the postgame show. But when we're talking about what's at stake here, that is part of the step one of course correcting where Notre Dame needs to go for the next 9+ games after Purdue. Right. And Notre Dame needs to take a hard look at from head coach to coordinators to the captains of the team that were elected by the players and to the role guys and the other starters, that this is the standard that we're not living up to. And it's on us to fix it. We have an opportunity at Purdue to take that next step. And if it doesn't, there's going to be some serious conversations after that. But what I think needs to happen is coming in, having a clear, full prepped week of practice, and coming in focused. I think that is as big of a part of step one as possible is your focus going into Saturday. Because it doesn't take a genius to look at that team that came out there against Northern Illinois and say that they weren't focused and that they weren't bought into what was going on. And that's where it starts for me.
The other thing too, Trevor, is we still don't know who this team is. Because if the team that showed up against Texas A&M showed up against Northern Illinois, we're talking about Notre Dame being 2-0 and ranked in the top 5. And Notre Dame's a much bigger favorite against Purdue because they would have beat Northern Illinois by at least 2 touchdowns if that team would have shown up. What version going to show up? This is what we've kind of been talking about with Marcus Freeman here and talked about it over the summer, and it continues to be the concern for him is we don't necessarily know what team is going to show up from week to week. Where's the disconnect? And so that's why I say, like, if they come out and look great this week, that doesn't answer anything in the big picture. It does answer something for this season because you had mentioned it. Like, look, there's a reality in sports where when you're playing a team that's far more dominant than you, you're going to look at it as an opportunity for yourself. But if that team comes out and plays well early, there's a level of this ain't our day. This team's too good for us. And no one's going to look at Notre Dame like that now. I don't care. I don't care if Notre Dame runs off their next 7 or 8 wins and they climb back into the top 10. Virginia's going to be like, oh, Northern Illinois beat them. We can beat them. Army's going to be like, Northern Illinois beat them. We can beat them. No one's going to be afraid of this football team anymore. And so it makes it imperative that this team regain some confidence and some swagger back that they completely did not have on Saturday. They didn't lose it against Northern Illinois. They never had it against Northern Illinois. And that's where Marcus Freeman's got to find some answers as to how could I have my team that ready to play A&M? And he starts talking about, and this is what's going to be interesting is because he starts talking about, hey, they started watching ESPN, and it's like, isn't that something you've got to be aware of before the game and deal with in your preparation before the game? When your players are looking at ESPN and how great they are, the last thing you should want to do is change your routine and say, well, we're going to confirm that we're arrived and because we're going to not practice on Thursday now because that's what we think about this team. Does anyone on the planet think that Marcus Freeman would have only done walkthroughs on Thursday if they were playing Louisville last weekend or if they were playing USC last weekend? Of course not. And that's the thing is like, how do you reprogram your team now to say, hey, listen, everybody is a team that we are going to take very seriously and we got to be ready for. And it's not just Marcus Freeman, too. We're going to learn a lot about this football team, Trevor, this weekend about your leadership because your leadership was null and void on Saturday. Even some of the answers I heard from the quote-unquote captains and All-Americans on both sides of the ball on Saturday were like, wow, I now have confirmed that everything my worst fears were true, that you just were not. I think I heard Howard Cross say something like, around halftime or something like that, they realized they were in a dogfight. Like, you didn't know that watching film? And so it just tells you the entire process was flawed. And it starts is at the top, not just Marcus Freeman, but with your leadership. And how you bounce back from this game is going to tell you a lot about your leadership. And it not just with Marcus Freeman. It's going to tell you a lot about your leadership in each room. And it's going to tell your leadership on both sides of the ball from a player level. How's the locker room? Is this something that tears this team apart? Is there like a lot of finger pointing that comes on now? The defense saying to the offense, like, oh, you guys got to do more. We can't, we can't lose games scoring 16 points. Is the offense going to say, hey, listen, we gave you a fourth quarter lead and you guys gave up? Do we see that? Or does this team say, hey, fellas, we all screwed up on Saturday. We all played a role in this loss and we are going to fix it. And those are things that you need to see, because if they don't do those things, then this is just going to they may go out and out talent Purdue for a win, but there's going to be some major cracks. And we saw that a little bit from Notre Dame in the past with teams that underachieved. Is you'd see that's what they're supposed to be versions of that team from time to time. Notre Dame in 2016, as bad as they were, it beat a pretty decent Miami team that year, right? I think it was a Miami team that won 9 games, handled your business.
Yep.
And then you also lost to Navy, and you come out first half and you give USC everything they can handle in a year where USC at that point in time was really good. And then USC kind of, did what they did to pull away from it. But those are different things that you look at and say, hey, listen, you've got to be able to respond mentally to what happened on Saturday. And that's why I say we're going to learn a lot about this football team, and that's what makes this game so important, Trevor. It's not even about Purdue. It's about Notre Dame. It's about what's their psyche, what's their mindset. Do they come out on Saturday with real confidence? Do they come on Saturday with fake confidence? Do they come out on Saturday flat? Those are the 3 options. And right now, I don't know that anyone can confidently say that they know what that's going to be.
This game opens up the opportunity for somebody on the team to step up and be that guy. And I'm not necessarily talking about on the field, right? We've seen it. Notre Dame has so far this year have had guys that produce in the field. Obviously, number 4 in the backfield is a dude. And there's not a whole lot of convincing that needs to happen there. Bo Collins has shown flashes of, hey, I can be that guy in the passing game for you. Feed me the ball. What I'm talking about is you have the opportunity, somebody on that team has the opportunity to come in and bring the juice. That's what I think has lacked. And I think of guys like Nano Safamensa, who didn't start last year, right? He was a role player and a darn good role player at that. But he was the guy, if you remember that 2022 almost behind the scenes video when Notre Dame beat Clemson. And he was the guy in the locker room that was firing everybody up. It's halftime and he's yelling at everybody and he's, man, like we don't have a takeaway yet. We don't have a sack yet, a tackle for a loss yet. And there's something about this team that I feel like they don't have that right now. The players that were elected captains all at one point in time have came out and said, I'm a leader in my own way, or have came out and said, I lead by example. I might not necessarily be the rah-rah guy, but I'm more of that one-on-one captain where I can sit down and give coaching and help develop people individually. Christian Gray talked about that with the mentorship that he received from Ben Morrison. But what Notre Dame lacked last Saturday was that guy to say, yo, it's time to go. Doesn't matter who we're playing. I'm talking about the Nano Safamenses of the world, the Bo Bowers of the world, the guys that even the little stuff that on a kickoff would run down the field and they're getting the student section hyped up and getting everybody into it, because
none of that energy on Saturday.
100%. And that kind
of Trevor, I don't know if you guys could see this on TV, but up in the press box, there was never a moment like, hey, we got this now. Even when they scored in the fourth quarter, there wasn't that. And people saying like, oh, they need vocal leaders. Yeah, to a degree. I mean, you need somebody to step up and say this, but the vocal leadership stops working if it's not backed up by action.
Totally.
What they need even more, again, vocal leadership needed. Somebody's got to step up and say, hey, this is not acceptable. But then you got to go out and practice and make sure and demand that everybody's going to a certain standard. And you've got to be the one to set that standard. You've got to be the one to go out there on Saturday and make that first big hit. I don't want to hear Howard Cross talking about this, that, and the other thing. I want to see Howard Cross go out there and make a big play on Saturday. I don't want to see Riley Mills as a leader get in front of the team and say, hey, we got to do this, this, and this, and this. No, I want to see you go out there and make a freaking play on Saturday. Like, I don't want to see Jack Kaiser, be hey, fellas, it's all good. We've got lots to play for. No, I want to see you go freaking stick somebody. Go hit somebody. I don't see Benjamin Morrison go pick a ball off and not get beat on a crucial crossing route late in the game. Somebody's got to step up and say, hey, listen, I don't want to hear Riley Leonard talk about I got to practice. I don't give a crap about all that. I want to see you go out and go make a play. That's what I want to see. And, it's like defensively, you've got all these captains, and when the game was on the line, not one of them stepped up and made a play to prevent them from going on a 5-minute game-winning drive. Not once. Not once. Not one of them. And that's what we need to see on Saturday as well, is, again, it comes down to where's your leadership? Leadership will emerge in a game like this against Purdue. And it will have emerged starting really yesterday, hopefully, but definitely today when they put the pads on. And, I mean, that's going to be a big key. The big part of their preparation this week, Trevor, is going to be, hey, they got to bring it. Because, again, what's at stake in this football game? What's at stake in this football game is your season to a degree and the tenure of Marcus Freeman to a degree. And sometimes I wonder, and some people have discussed it in the chat a little bit, and I was talking about this with a couple guys before the show, but I really wonder if sometimes Marcus Freeman maybe listens to too many people and doesn't have enough conviction about certain things on his own. I want to see him get back saying look, okay, this is what I believe and we're going to do it, and then sink or swim. Because right now, your career at Notre Dame is essentially on the line this week. I mean, Trevor, I don't know how this team in year 3 recovers from a road loss to Purdue to fall to 1-2. Preseason number 5 team in the country. It's like getting a number 5 has been a horrible thing for Marcus Freeman. He's gotten a number 5 twice in his career, and both times, actually, I don't count the bowl game. That's unfair because that wasn't his team. He wasn't the coach of that team. But the other 2 times, you were number 5 preseason going to Ohio State, and you lost 2 games in a row. You go into this weekend, and you're number 5 in the country in the AP, and you lose. Okay, so it was frustrating to hear from Marcus Freeman is he's talking about after the game, he's talking about how we got to learn to handle success better. I said that on Tuesday of last week. How is that message not being hammered in your player's head last Tuesday? and that's kind of frustrating. But at the end of the day, if they don't go out and win this game this weekend, and again, it's one of those, I don't care if it's ugly or a blowout. I really don't. They need to win this game. The better they play, the better we'll all feel about it. But they've got to win this game because I honestly don't know how you recover from this. Number one, it's going to say, who else are you going to beat? Because if beating Northern Illinois and Purdue is really tough business, then who's not going to be tough business? And so that's why, again, I think this weekend is huge for them, Trevor, is they've got to. There's a lot more at stake here than I think maybe they realize. Because they're probably looking at a real micro level,
Sure.
like, it's just one game, one play, one life, one game. Okay, that's all fine, but you got to have some awareness of what's outside of that. Like, yes, you got to focus on that one play, but as a coach, I'm talking about, you've got to be more aware of some more bigger picture, broad things. And that's why I think this Purdue game is huge. Because this is it's not a make or break moment for Notre Dame, because I don't think a win makes this team, but it can be a break moment, and that's what we need to see.
It's a sink or float opportunity, to be honest with you, and that's the way that I look at it. Notre Dame needs to show themselves, needs to show us as Irish Nation. They need to show that they can handle the bright lights, right? And I'm not talking about the bright lights of college game day. I'm not talking about the bright lights of a top 20 showdown at night. I'm talking about when something needs to happen, because something needs to happen this game. This isn't well, I guess we'll go out there and we'll see what happens. That's what I mean when the lights are on you. The spotlight is now on Notre Dame, and it's not the good kind. When you have other coaches referencing your team, talking about how, hey, look at Notre Dame versus Northern Illinois, nothing's guaranteed. That's the narrative of your team after you just beat Texas A&M in College Station at night. So I want to know how this team is going to handle what's at stake. Is how can they handle it when their back is against the wall and they're, for lack of better analogies, they're a wounded animal. They're trying to find their way. They need to turn it around. And how they respond this week is going to be a big key indicator for me, whether it's a 3-point win or a 30-point win. How you respond is going to be everything. Because let's be real, much like how we talked about last week, Notre Dame is the more talented team. And that's not Purdue specific. You could say that about 90% of the teams on Notre Dame's schedule. Just to be fair. That's why you went out and got Mike Denbrock. And that's why you went out and got Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell. And that sophomore class has another year under their belt. Right? But you need to go out and show yourselves, one, that you can do this. Because as much as, you're media facing and you can say all the right things, but we will see what that's like on Saturday, whether you say it or not. And I got to see it. I got to see that the team believes in what they are saying and the coaches believe in what they are saying. And if that doesn't come to fruition, that's what's at stake. Is now you have to look at a program and say, all right, well, not only do the players not believe in themselves, do the coaches believe in the players they have? Do they believe in themselves? And I know it's so crazy to think about that the game that we're talking about is Purdue. But this is a situation that you're in right now, and you have to play with the cards that you're dealt. And we'll see what direction it goes in from here.
You got to deal with the reality you have, not the reality you want.
100%.
And if you want a different reality, then you got to do something about it and create it. That's where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
So if they do it, if they are able to go out and get a win, then obviously that builds some momentum. And then whether or not this is fixed is determined by how much they can consecutively string things together. Because if we're looking big picture at Marcus Freeman, we have definitely seen some very impressive stretches under him where they've won, certain amount of games in a row or had real good solid wins. But the reality is he's now in year 3, and won 9 games his first year and won 10 games his second year, but he's never had more than 5 wins in a row. He had 5 wins in a row during the 2022 season. So beat UNLV, Syracuse, Clemson, Navy, BC, and lost to USC. If you count the bowl game and then the start of 2023, they won 5 games in a row, beat South Carolina, Navy, Tennessee State, NC State, Central Michigan, and then went 1-2 the next 3 games. And then they won 2, lost another one, won 3 at the end of the year, and then 1 here. So they had a 4-game winning streak that just got snapped again. So, I mean, that's your next benchmark is, can you really go on a roll? But it has to start here. And I do believe that how they perform against Purdue will have a say in then can they get rolling. Like if you just scrape by the next 2 weeks and kind of go through and just, okay, you won, but you won ugly. The next 2 games look a lot like Texas A&M result wise. You're not going to be in a great position when Louisville comes to town. And it's going to be much harder for you to go on a run. So at some point in time, they've got to get rolling. Is this the week, or is this the week that sets up that roll? That's something that we're going to find out. So I do think, we talked a lot about, it's really devastating if you lose, but I do think winning is important, obviously, beyond just you're not losing, but from the standpoint of it does play a role in your confidence. Like just winning ugly doesn't necessarily make you a confident football team. Coming out there and playing to your potential is what reignites that confidence that you had, that swagger that was, and again, Trevor, like here's what's so frustrating about it. It wasn't false swagger, because false swagger does not present itself in the fourth quarter of a tough game. It is gone by then. False swagger goes away when that team takes the ball right down the field and gets a field goal and then takes another lead. And that's not that's not false swagger. False swagger dissipates real fast if it's not real. How that was real swagger and confidence, and it was gone on Saturday. So you've got to rebuild that. And the better you play, the faster that is, because you've got to make sure that what comes back isn't a false sense of bravado or swagger. It's got to be real and genuine. And that's where I'm at with it.
The weird thing is you could make the argument, and you'll have to hear me out here, but you could make the argument that the mantra the team had going into the Texas A&M game and the Northern Illinois game was almost the same, of that we are better than you. Texas A&M, you saw that swagger and the fire of no matter what you throw at us, we're the more prepared team. We're the more athletic team. We're the tougher team. And that's where that fourth quarter swagger comes in that you were talking about, right? Unfortunately, on the flip side of that coin, you turn in the next week and you get so into it of yourself that you're like, yeah, we're better than you. So we're just not going to practice. We're just not going to take this seriously because we know that you're better than you. And that's what's weird. It's, you could almost look at that and say, yeah, I think both weeks Notre Dame was very confident that they were better. But where that kind of dissipates is, to your point, when Texas A&M comes back and punches you in the mouth, you can say, we're better than you. This is nothing to us. Whereas Northern Illinois does that, and it's like, oh crap, I thought we were better than you. And that's the weird line that you kind of have to walk. Notre Dame needs to put themselves in a spot where they themselves and, the media, the local media like us, like the Irish Breakdown crew, other media outlets around the team, and from a national perspective, they need to put themselves in a position where they look at that Northern Illinois game like it is an anomaly. And they need to position themselves to say, at the end of the year, ideally, because now if Notre Dame wants to make the playoffs, I firmly believe it has to be an 11-1 type season. It's funny, we talked about before the Texas A&M game, we talked about how if you lose this game, the season's not over, but the margin for error is smaller. Now that you lost to Northern Illinois, I'd make the argument the margin for error is 0. There is no, well, maybe if, they play USC tough at the end of the year. No, there is no, you run the table the rest of the year. Let's just call that a common ground. Mm-hmm. They need to get to the point where they themselves believe that they are so good that Northern Illinois we know exactly why. We know why we lost that game. It is an anomaly. There is no question that Notre Dame is one of the best 12 teams in the country. And that's the position that they have to put themselves in. Starts with Purdue. And like we've been talking about, it starts with taking that step in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it like you're making a good point, because I thought you were going to start talking about, whether or not they will or won't or can or can't get into the playoff. And I was going to be like, pump the brakes. But you said it perfectly. Because, of course, if Notre Dame runs the table, they're in the playoff. Now, where they're seated is going to be up for debate. But at this point in time, like, I don't care about that right now. But how you play this weekend is going to be something that can then set you up to then potentially go on that kind of run. Because, as you mentioned, you're now in like 10-2 might have been able to get you in, but not 10-2 with a home loss against Northern Illinois where they outplayed you for 60 minutes. Like, you're going to have to be 11-1, barring there's just a bunch of 4-loss teams out there.
Mm-hmm.
But how you to get there, you have to first come out and handle your business Saturday. And you know what I want to see on Saturday, Trevor? I'm going to be honest with you, and we'll get into specifics from a offense, defense. I'm just about as a team. I want to see this team really pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And if this team doesn't come out pissed, and I don't mean pissed in like they're taking late shots at Purdue or talking a lot of trash, or that's emotional. I'm not talking about emotional. I'm talking about playing with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, because it's like when we all played sports, right? And you go out, Trevor, I know you played baseball as well as I did. You don't have that game where you go 0 for 3 with a couple strikeouts and a pop out against some pitcher that sucks, and you're just like, you're embarrassed with how you played. You come out that next game and man, you're locked in. You're kind of pissed, because I want to show everyone that's not who I am. You come out that next game, go 3 for 4 with a couple doubles and and make 2 great plays at shortstop. And like, that's what I'm talking about. Come out pissed off. Like, that's not who we are. We embarrassed ourselves, and we put on this Notre Dame uniform, and we had Manti Te'o there, and we disappointed him. We disappointed our fans. We heard the boos and it's going to be Why does us being disappointed in how you played motivation for you not to play that way? Explain that to me, All-American. I don't understand that. That's basically what Howard Cross said after the game, correct? I mean, you heard that, right? Like, wait a minute. You getting embarrassed by Northern Illinois wasn't enough for you to have motivation to go play better? You needed to wait till you got booed by the fans who spent hundreds of dollars just on tickets, thousands of dollars on travel. They're the bad guy now? Not you just got embarrassed at Northern Illinois by Northern Illinois, right? But you need the fans booing you to be motivation. Here's a crazy thought, Trevor. Had you not embarrassed yourself against Northern Illinois, no one's booing you, right? So that just makes me think like there is something going on in that locker room where they're not really understanding what's at stake right now. And that's why I need to see something completely different on Saturday for me to, like, nothing that happens. They could win 70-0, and it doesn't change a whole lot for me. And matter of fact, that might actually piss me off a little bit more, because I'm like, this is who you should have been. But it doesn't guarantee that they're not going to lay an egg the next week against Miami of Ohio. Right? But I need to see the right attitude on Saturday, because if they have the right attitude, it tells me they took the right lessons from the loss. And saying that we're going to be motivated by the fans booing us for how we embarrassed this institution, this program, and all the people that came before us, we embarrassed them with this loss. That's the motivation we need to make sure that never happens again. Not that you don't get booed, not that people don't say bad things about you on social media, because, hey, guess what, guys? People are going to talk trash about you no matter what. Mm-hmm. This is why I don't care what people say about me, because, like, no matter what stance I take, pro BK, anti BK, pro Riley Leonard, anti Riley Leonard, somebody's going to be pissed off at me. So I'm just going to be honest with you and give you my opinion and not really care what anybody thinks, right? Like, you need to focus on you as a team and come out and play with that attitude. That's a big thing for me, Trevor, against Purdue. Is I don't want you just to go out talent Purdue. I want you to take out all your frustrations on Purdue, because that, you know what that's going to tell me, Trevor? It's going to tell me that this team does have some pride. that this team is pissed off about how they embarrass themselves. And I don't want to see them come out and say, well, see, maybe the fans will like us now. Like, I don't want to hear all that crap. You embarrassed yourself. Go out and play like you're embarrassed and you want to prove something that no. Yeah, we look like crap on that Saturday. And I've used this example before. Ohio State. I talked about it last week. Before this game, I talked about Ohio State losing to Virginia Tech and getting embarrassed by Virginia Tech in that game. Lost by 2 touchdowns to Virginia Tech. And that Ohio State team kind of came out with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder after that, and they went on a long run. So is it possible? Sure. And no, I don't think that Virginia Tech team was all that much better than this Northern Illinois team. Guys, we told you all last week that this is a good football team. This is a Michael Brewer-led Virginia Tech team. Right? So, no, but they got embarrassed. Right? They got embarrassed, and they came out and said, no, this isn't going to happen again. This isn't going to happen again. And JT Barrett has 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, and he plays terrible, and the offense plays terrible. Zeke Elliott does nothing. But they came out the next week, and then the week after that, and then the week after that, like a pissed-off football team. They came out the next week, and they beat Kent State 66-0, and JT Barrett threw 6 touchdowns. Week after that, they beat Cincinnati 50-28. JT Barrett threw 4 touchdowns. Week after that, they come out and beat Maryland on the road 52-24. JT Barrett throws 4 touchdowns. You know, like, so again, don't let Northern Illinois define who you are. Don't let that. How you respond is going to define who you are, good or bad. That's going to be the biggest takeaway from the game this weekend, is that.
I need to see the passion, man. I need to see a team that wants to be there and believes in what they are doing. You should be, and I don't want to beat a dead horse because you hit the nail on the head, but you need to be embarrassed for yourself. You're Notre Dame. People are going to hate you regardless of what you do. But you need to channel that into people need to hate you for the right reasons because they don't want to see you successful.
Hate me because I just dominate you week after week. And
yeah.
We're it's like there was this great video before the game, Trevor. And looking back on it, I'm like, man, I wish this football team had the same mentality that Lou Holtz had. At the end of the video, he basically said, we're Notre Dame. And they basically saying like they hate us because we're Notre Dame and you ain't. Lou Holtz said that. Crowd goes nuts. And I'm thinking like, if only the Notre Dame football team had that mentality. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
100%.
We're going to play like a way, like we're going to hate, we want you to hate us. It's like you watch the U, right? Remember that? And they're talking about we hate everything Notre Dame stands for. Well, those guys growing up hated Notre Dame because when they were growing up, Notre Dame was pretty darn good. And, you know, I want you to hate us because we're on national TV every weekend and you're not. Why? Because we're this and you're not. We're competing for championships and you're not. We're doing this and you're not. We're successful and you're not. We're kicking your butt in your own place and there's not a dang thing you can do about it.
Right.
That's what you need to see. And that's the attitude that they need to have.
Why do you think everybody hated Alabama from 2009 to 2020? It is because they were that team. I had an old coach that would always talk to me about if somebody's not hating you, you're doing something wrong. Because there are some people out there that just don't want to see you be successful. And that is Notre Dame in a nutshell, man. You hear everybody talk about it. You either love Notre Dame or hate Notre Dame. But where you know you are doing something wrong is when the people who love you start to hate you. I know we're kind of throwing a lot of word mumbo jumbo in here. But that's the thing, is you're Notre Dame. Wear that. And you can't get this little taste of, oh my goodness, we're actually starting to get some respect around here. Let's take the foot off the gas pedal. If anything, it should have been the opposite. And that is what is so frustrating from last week, is you had the opportunity to blow the doors off of this season, man. You had the opportunity to go out and say, yeah, some areas of improvement against Texas A&M, but we got the win. We got a 10-point win as 3-point dogs in the 4th largest crowd of that stadium's history. And no, it's not a 60,000 attendance max crowd. 100,000+ people. You set the 4th largest attendance record at that game. and you had the opportunity to come in and say, hey, we're here. And you've dug yourself in a hole. And now it's all about how you respond. I have such a love-hate relationship with the one play, one life, 1 week at a time sort of thing. I think in instances like this, now that you've dug yourself in a hole, you have to take things 1 week at a time. But there are instances where I think that it's okay to look at the grand scheme of, hey, this is why we're practicing this hard for Northern Illinois, because this is what's at stake in the grand scheme of our season. Instead of just, yeah, well, we'll take this practice and we'll see how it goes. And then we'll show up Wednesday and see how it goes. And we'll evaluate on Thursday. You talk all the time. Marcus Freeman talks all the time about like living a standard. You don't play down to the level of the opponent, and you don't play up to the level of your opponent. You play to your standard, which is above every
and his
opponent.
team does not do that. His team has never done that. Ever done that. Not with any consistency. No, there's times they show up and beat a BC like you're supposed to beat a BC.
Sure.
Right. And that's fine. And there's times you beat a Tennessee State the way you're supposed to beat a Tennessee State, or a Navy the way you're supposed to beat a Navy. But consistently, that's not at all what his team does. They don't play to a standard. Do you think that they played to the standard emotionally and physically against Duke last year, or against Louisville last year, or against Clemson last year, or against Northern Illinois? No. And so that's why I say you're not fixing all this in 1 week. Nothing that happens against Purdue fixes it, but it's a big, important step. And I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to be like, I don't care if you win by 70. It still sucks that you lost in Illinois. And that's not what we're saying, because like it's time to move on from that. Like you can't fix that. It's about taking a positive step. But it doesn't erase all of that, but it can still be a positive step. And I think this team needs that emotional kick in the pants of a good performance. And I don't even mean necessarily one that lacks sloppiness. I mean more so you come out and you're confident, you're playing hard, you're getting after it, you're not getting beat in the trenches. If you drop a ball, you drop a ball. You miss a tackle, you miss that. It's still early enough in the season where I can live with some of that. But what I can't live with is a team that doesn't fight. I can't live with a team that has no emotion. I can't live with a team that has no leadership. I can't live with a team that's schizophrenic emotionally week to week to week. That I can't live with. I've said this a million times, Trevor. I know you've heard me say it. I can live with technical mistakes. I can live with assignment mistakes. I can correct some of the things that went wrong. I can fix Ashton Craig constantly holding guys. I can fix that. And he should have got called for 5 holding penalties on Saturday. I mean, literally, he's just reaching jerseys. That needs to get fixed, but I can fix that. What I can't fix necessarily just in a drill is you had play with no passion, or you did play with passion. The energy on the sideline was and there was no reading of the it's like what I said with my play call on the 2nd and 1 play call. I have no problem in theory with Mike Denbrock running a double post with a backside smash in that situation. I have no problem. Everybody knows double post is like my favorite football play. But you've got to have enough awareness of who your football team is to say, my quarterback is struggling to make real basic reads. He almost threw a pick 2 plays before on a comeback. He threw a late comeback route backside, almost got picked. I can't ask him to read double posts in this situation. There's got to be some awareness of, here's who my team is. Now let's go fix it. And to a degree, we're going to learn if Marcus Freeman has that to a degree this weekend, because this is worse than Stanford in 2022. This is worse than Marshall in 2020, even though this is a better team than Stanford. That's not the point. It's who you are as a program.
Yep.
And so in order to bounce back, the head coach is going to have to have some awareness and ability to read his football team a little better. And he's going to have to establish a level of, like, this is what he said, Trevor, in the thing. He said, we've got to be able to find a way to be more consistent in our emotional preparation. And I wanted to be like, here's a thought. If you want to be more consistent in your emotional preparation, how about you have more consistency in your physical preparation? Don't not practice on Thursday. Just do a walkthrough and then be shocked when your team, which is really young in a lot of instances.
Yeah.
And really new in a lot to the system in a lot of instances, they're not ready for that in week 2. The fact that he wasn't aware, he didn't have that kind of read on the team concerns me. So this Saturday is going to tell us if Marcus Freeman really did have a look in the mirror, come to Jesus moment about how this. And it's not about yelling at him all week. It's not about tearing them down all week. That's not what I'm talking about. If anything, it's about building them up this week.
Totally.
You know, it's, hey, look, this isn't okay. This is not okay. We're going to do something about it. And it's so, you know, I don't want Joe Rudolph going out there and MF and Nash and Craig every day. I want him to go out there and spend extra time working on hand placement.
Yep.
I don't want Mike Denbrock telling Riley Leonard, you freaking suck and can't throw a ball down the field. That may be true right now. Fix it. Identify why. What's the, hey, Riley, what are you seeing here? Well, coach, okay, he's struggling with his reads. I got it. And we'll get into that a little bit. But like, I want to see Al Washington and Al Golden get in with the D line and say, hey, look, what's going on here? It's okay, coach, here's what, you know, and then fix it. Right? That's what we're going to find out this weekend. If they can push the right buttons to fix it and have that, can they look in the mirror, or is it just going to be a let's yell at them all week and tear them down all week and then hope that motivates them to go play well? I don't think that's what they're going to do, because they don't have a lot of coaches that strike me as that type of coach. Like Al Golden, I don't see Al Golden as the guy that's just going to MF the defense the whole week. I don't know that he doesn't strike me as that kind of coach.
Sure.
And you hope that they're not, but you know, but this is kind of what we're referring to. So go ahead and wrap this part up, Trevor, and we'll let you kind of have the last word on this.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking, really, and I'm sure I'm in the same category as a lot of you guys. I thought so much about, what do you say as a head coach after a win like this? You hear about self-reflection, and you hear about just the theme for this game and this week of practice, and it kind of just finally hit me. If I'm Marcus Freeman, I'm preaching from the top down, and what I want to see from the team this week, play fearless, man. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see linebackers sitting on their heels absorbing tackles because they're afraid if they go in out of control, they're going to miss it. At this point, to your point, that's a correctable mistake. I now need to see that this team plays with the fire and passion that they should have. My message all week in practice is be fearless. There's 2 people, slightly more than 2, that I can think of on Saturday that played fearless. Jaden Ausberry played fearless, came in and took advantage of most of the opportunities that he got when he played. And the other one was Jeremiah Love. Took it upon himself to hurdle a 6-foot-tall safety to get into the end zone. Fearless. Easiest thing would have been maybe a little shimmy, lower the shoulder, see what you can do there. Play fearless as a team, man. That's what I need to see. Not to the point where you're making mistakes outside of the whistle. Not to the point where you are, you know, grabbing face masks and tackling people out of bounds. That's not what I mean at all. I don't mean play out of character. I mean between the whistles, play fearless. And that's what I want to see. And that's what I hope to God the messaging is this week at practice. And I think starting with that messaging, like we're about to get into, is going to start freeing up your quarterback to be himself and be why you brought him here. And that is what I am praying, that's the message that started Saturday night, that they're going to be talking about on the bus ride or plane ride to West Lafayette. I hope that's what they're talking about every practice, every team meeting, is play fearless. And that's what I'm hoping.
So let's get into part 2 of today's show, Trevor, and that is going to be a discussion about quarterback, because it is real lazy to simply say Riley Leonard is why they lost on Saturday. It's equally as lazy to say, well, you know, it's not Riley's fault. It's you know, they didn't do this. Jaden Greathouse dropped a pass. You know, the offensive line didn't protect these 2 snaps or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, everybody played a role in the loss. But we can also sit there and look and say, quarterback play has not been even close to good enough. Not even close to good enough so far. And so that's where they're at. They've got to find some answers at quarterback, because even if everybody else steps up and plays well on Saturday, but the quarterback plays the way he did on Saturday, or not even he, the position, because obviously Riley Leonard did it, but you know, whoever's going to be the quarterback on Saturday, you have to play better. You know, so you know, these guys that they're handling this, they're doing all, you know, quarterback's playing bad, hurts us. And a lot of that's BS. You could do your job no matter what, but there does come a point in time where they're also human beings. And when a quarterback continues to make mistakes, it's kind of like, man, you know, And it's true for a quarterback when an O-line keeps letting guys through. It's like gets to a point where it's like even when you're not getting pressured, it's like your internal clock has been sped up. And you've got a receiver that keeps dropping the ball. You're not going to throw him the ball because I'm sick of this guy dropping balls. You know what I mean? So that's human nature. You got to work past. But as coaches, this week they have to right now find answers at quarterback. And I wrote an article today about this. And this was before the quote-unquote news about Riley Leonard came out. So just so you guys know, I've seen the tweet about Riley Leonard having a labrum issue on his left shoulder, and that he's still expected to play. I've reached out to people at Notre Dame. They have simply said that he's not on their injury report, and he'll be a full participant in practice and is expected to play. That's all they'll say. So I said, is it a false report? I've told you everything that I can tell you. So what that tells me is he is injured, but it's something he can play through. I don't know how I feel about that because you've got a mobile quarterback who now has a banged up shoulder. So I don't know what's going on with Notre Dame. I don't know what the plan is, but let's just kind of work with they're going to play him. Because if they're going to play him, then the answer doesn't change of what I discussed in the article. Notre Dame has 3 options, Trevor, and we're going to break down each one. Number 1, if Riley Leonard's your guy, and he's the guy you're going to roll with, and he's the guy you truly believe in to be your quarterback, then you stick with him in every capacity. And what that means is, I know you've got an offense that you think works, and you think it works because it worked last year and it worked. But you also have to be, as a coaching staff, willing to say, hey, look, this is where our quarterback is right now. Yes, I would love for him to look like Jane Daniels next week, but he's not going to. We're going to have to eventually get him to the point where he's a more effective player of reading full field reads and all that kind of stuff. And I get all that, but that's not where he is. And a quote unquote good week of practice is not going to fix that. What you're going to need to do is you have to lean into him and build around him. We'll talk about what that looks like. Number 2 is if he's not the guy and you're not willing to alter your offense to fit him because you don't think he's good enough for you to do that, then you need to make a change. And then there's 2 options within that change. Number 1, and this is number 2 overall, is go with the temporary fix of just put your backup quarterback in the game. And that's Steve Angeli. Put him in the game. He started the bowl game. He played a lot last year. It is what it is. We'll get into specifics of what that looks like. Or number 3 is, okay, it's time to turn the keys over to the future. Whether that's Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr, I don't care. I'm not saying what Notre Dame should do. I think most people know what my 2 answers would be, but that's not the point. The point is you have 3 options. You need to figure out now what you want. And so I will tell you what I think they should do moving forward. But the answer is, Trevor, they've got to make a decision. They can't do this, well, Riley's going to start, but he's on a short leash and all that. No, if he's on a short leash, he's a senior. He's been here for 2 games. You've got talented quarterbacks. If you have that little faith in him that you're not willing to adjust your offense to fit his style, then just move on. And now you're going to screw yourself over when it comes to future portal quarterbacks, but hopefully you don't need to do that anymore. So that's really the 3 options. Let's start first, Trevor, with option number 1. And this is just an order of like practicality, not so much an order of what we think they should do. But, let's get into this aspect of if Riley's going to be your starter for Purdue, and just Purdue, just forget the rest of the season, but for Purdue, you have to look at the first 2 games and say, what we're asking him to do, he can't do right now for whatever reason, whether he's not an accurate deep ball thrower or he's not reading defenses or whatever the case may be. He's not comfortable. He's not processing reads. He's not comfortable making the throws that we're asking him to make. So we got to figure something out, because when a quarterback's uncomfortable with certain things, he's even going to miss on the throws he normally makes. Mm-hmm. Like the throw to Jaden Greathouse in the first series. I've seen Riley Leonard make that throw at Duke 30 times.
Yeah.
I've seen him make it in practice. And he wasn't even close to Jaden Greathouse because there's a mental block up here. And Trevor, you played quarterback. I played quarterback. I've coached quarterbacks. When a quarterback's in his head, it screws everything up. His footwork gets jacked up. His arm, his release speed gets jacked up. His release point gets jacked up. His timing gets jacked up. It all gets jacked up. So you've got to simplify for this game. If he's your guy, simplify your reads for him. You've also got, again, 9 starters who are freshman or sophomore eligibility, and your 2 non-freshman or sophomore guys are first semester guys or first, like, they didn't play in the spring. They were around, but they didn't play in the spring in Bo Collins and Riley Leonard. You've got to simplify and build. You say, look, I thought they could handle this. We put too much on them. Let's pull things back scheme-wise. Let's maybe pick up the tempo. Let's maybe get a little bit more creative with our personnel. Let's maybe get a little bit more creative with some of our pre-step movement, but the reads are going to be simplified. Riley, you got this or this to check down, this to this, run. Like, here's where we're at. Maybe design 4 or 5 plays a game where he has no read. Trevor, you know how this works. It's, hey, we know we can manipulate them into a cover 1. When we manipulate in that cover 1, we're taking a shot to Chris Mitchell on a go route. That's just what we're doing.
Yep.
Right? There is no read. Simple things like that where Riley sits back and just lets it rip. And if he can't execute that, then it's time to move on. If he can't do that, then you've got your answer. It's time to move on. But just doing what you're doing and hoping he figures it out isn't the answer. So if he's your guy, if they make that decision, right or wrong, if that's the decision they make, they have to alter course when it comes to how they prepare and how they run the offense with him at quarterback. Because what they're doing right now doesn't really fit who Riley Leonard is, in my opinion, especially what we saw this past weekend.
Look at what they do with starting quarterbacks. And I don't want to call Riley Leonard new because he is a senior in college, but new to this system. He didn't finish the season last year. And in his final 2 games that he played in, he was kind of banged up. So, I don't want to label him as a new quarterback, but the way that I would go about Riley Leonard from a game-to-game, a week-to-week basis is how I would treat a rookie quarterback in the NFL. You're not going to go ask Bo Nix for the Broncos, or you're not going to go ask Caleb Williams for the Bears to go out and make multi-level reads that you would ask a Joe Burrow or a Patrick Mahomes of. One thing that I want to see is, one of the easiest things to do for a quarterback to get them comfortable, get him outside of the pocket. Roll him out a little bit. Get him in some sort of rhythm. That is the one glaring issue that I've seen from Mike Denbrock, is there seems like there has been no issue to try to get Riley Leonard into a rhythm. And that starts with getting your tight ends more involved. Yes, I know Mitchell Evans is banged up. You're going to tell me that Eli Raridan and Cooper Flanagan are that bad to where they can't get involved more in the passing game? I don't believe you. I don't. There's been no attempt to try to get the tight ends in the run or involved in the pass game. And no, I'm not talking about having, Riley Leonard had a couple of good deep in routes to Mitchell Evans. And that's not even what I'm talking about. Get Riley Leonard out of the pocket and have a tight end flare out into the flat. Something. Get him in a groove. They ran play action once on Saturday. And you're asking your quarterback to go drop back 36 times and pick apart a defense, which is something that he didn't show that he could do in week 1. So for me, if Riley Leonard is going to be the guy, you almost have to take a step back and say, what can we do early to get him in a rhythm? Roll him outside of the pocket. Simplify your route concepts. Run simple high-low reads.
Yeah.
Run a slot corner with an underneath hitch.
Yeah. Everything is a vertical stretch right now, Trevor. Everything is left to right ISO routes. There's not a lot of vertical stretch concepts like you mentioned, high lows, things where like, hey, if they're bringing pressure, I've got Chris Mitchell running a cross route against a corner who can't run with him, or I've got Bo. Exactly right. Like everything is geared towards full field reads, and a lot and full field reads tend to be the vertical routes, which is actually a horizontal stretch. A horizontal stretch is when stuff that you're running, all stops, all goes, things like that, where you've got to kind of go left to right, right to left, whatever, and it's sort of one-on-one ISOs. Vertical reads, just so people understand, is more of a low to high, high to low. So you're reading vertically, even though the it's not about the route concept, because all verticals is a horizontal stretch, is a horizontal read.
Mm-hmm.
right? So a vertical read is more like smash, flood concepts, high lows, post with an over coming underneath with a slide. That's a vertical read. To your point, they're not running much of that. There's a couple things like the Jaden Greathouse over route was that. There's a couple of those, but maybe some of those things are needed. You need a little heavier dose of that in hopes of getting your receivers running different ways. I found as a quarterback that stuff can be a little bit easier to complete outside of, just the more like the vertical stuff. You got to be a little bit more precise on as a passer, right? Well, right now, Riley Leonard's not doing anything precise. So do some of this stuff that gets you going, Trevor, to your point, because those are things as a quarterback that can slow your mind down. And that's really what you and I are talking about is it's slowing his mind down, because the more reads he has, the more he feels he has to rush through them. And you can see it on the all 22. You can see him go boom, boom, boom. Like he's not reading anything.
Yeah. I mean, look at the additional hitch steps that he's taken on that. I forgot what quarter it was in, but it was when he was about a yard behind, 2 seconds too late on that deep in route to Jaden Greathouse. That trigger should have been pulled in his break, right? And it was just that last second, like, I want to throw this. I know he's open. I know he's going to be open. I'm going to sit on it for a second. Throws off your timing. When you're a quarterback and you are put in a favorable matchup, the route concepts that are being ran are isolating one specific defender. Like I said, on a high-low, slot corner, boundary hitch type of read, it simplifies your read as a quarterback. That's the stuff that can help get him in a rhythm. And then you can start chunking away at, all right, now let's start looking at longer developing plays. And I know this isn't really the topic of conversation here, but not only will that get your quarterback in a rhythm, that will get your offensive line in a rhythm as well. And then it's kind of that domino effect of, okay, now receivers are starting to get confidence because they know they're getting targets. But it starts with the quarterback. It starts with getting Riley Leonard in that rhythm and slowing down his mental process. Because I remember my first game starting, it was nowhere near starting in Texas A&M and being at Duke or anything. But when you're a 16-year-old kid starting in front of 8,000 people, to you, that's the show, man. That's it. And what my coach did not ask of me is to go run, a multi-layered read and, testing my ability to step up in the pocket. And for those of you who don't know, I'm not a mobile quarterback in the slightest. I can't escape the pocket, even if I wanted to, and ran track for 4 years. It's just not in my repertoire. But you have a quarterback in Riley Leonard who can, which even begs the question even more to roll out in the pocket. You want one of his, maybe tertiary reads, his third read, to be running the ball, something that he's good at. Nothing easier than getting him outside of the pocket and rolling protection with him and seeing where he can take it from there. And then you just start to chunk away to see. And to your point, man, if he can't do that, then it's time. But you can't overload this kid's plate with no practice in the spring, no real legitimate reps in the spring. And say, here's the keys to the entire offense. I'm expecting you to go run everything. And I just don't think it'd be giving him a fair shot to say, well, you weren't able to run our offense to its full effectiveness, even though we didn't really do our due diligence as a coaching staff to put you in a position to be successful. And now we're going to yank you. Because that is where you are setting your quarterbacks up for failure. That's where I don't agree with the short leash stuff. If you're going to pick a guy, that has to be your guy. And I will be looking to see on Saturday if they do those things to get him in a rhythm early. Get the ball into your playmakers' hands. And no, that doesn't mean sending Jaden Greathouse on a seam route and you're asking him to fit it in between the underneath linebacker and the single high safety. That's
build to that. Build to that. That's what we're saying. Build to that. You want him to be able to make those throws, which you're going to need to be able to make those throws to beat Louisville and to beat Florida State and Georgia Tech and USC and Georgia and Alabama and all these teams that right now we're not even worried about. It comes down to this, man. You've got to build to that, because it's just this. Look, like somebody said in the chat on Saturday, I said, look, I have no problem with them calling a 2nd and 1. but they needed to call something with a little simpler. And somebody was like, "Oh, that's a stretch," and he needs to be able to read. And I said, "Yeah, he should be able to read that, but whether or not a guy should doesn't mean that's your present reality. As a coach, you have to deal with your present. If you call a play, knowing a guy has to make a complex read, when all game he's been struggling to make complex reads, that's not a him problem. That's a you problem. You have to recognize that as a coach and adjust. That's the key. And so that to me is where I'm at with this, Trevor, is you've got to kind of start over again. And here's the thing. If he's injured to the point where I don't know how much you're going to be able to run him, it's especially important that you do this stuff because you don't have that running threat anymore. You now have to make sure that you get him comfortable in the offense. Yeah. And honestly, if he does have a hurt shoulder, I would not play him this weekend. I wouldn't, because you're setting him up to fail, in my opinion. He comes out and struggles throwing, and you can't – because, like, normally to get him in the rhythm, he's even said it, he likes to run and get hit. And if you're going to take that away, like, look, just get him healthy. Let him get mentally and physically healthy for a week. Let Steve or Kenny or CJ or whoever go out and win that game, probably be Steve. And then kind of get him back in there when he's physically and mentally a little bit more right. But if you're going to start him and you're dead set on starting him, it's even more important that you do this, which is get things that he can get into a rhythm throwing the ball. Because if he comes out in this game on Saturday and he can't get into the rhythm throwing the ball and he can't run, you're screwed. You're screwed. So that's kind of it's imperative no matter what, but it's even more so if he can't run the way that you'd hope for him to be able to run. Absolutely. And that's where you go. And look, and just some of you just stop with the whole they can't bench him because of NIL. There's no contract that says a guy can't be benched. There's not just stop. This is what I'm talking about. We're going to have a grown-up conversation, not this nonsense. Oh, they can't play him because they're paying him NIL money. Notre Dame is going to lose a lot more than what they're paying Riley Leonard if they keep losing games. If they think someone else gives them a better chance to win, they will play him. They will play him. RJ Open got NIL money. He didn't play nearly as much as Josh Burnham did on Saturday. Why? Because he wasn't playing well. Rod Hurd got some NIL money coming to Notre Dame. He doesn't start for Notre Dame. Adon Schuler does. Right? Just stop. I'm so sick and tired of just the people coming in and just throwing this nonsense. We're not doing that here. We're not. Have constructive conversation, or just keep your thoughts to yourself, or go put them on Twitter, because I don't care what people put on Twitter. I don't care about Twitter. Right? So my point is this. If he is going to be your starter, Notre Dame, then you need to adjust what you're doing to get him it's about him, not you. If he's your guy, it's about what he's good at, what you need to do to get him right. And if that's not the case, and he's not your guy, and you don't have enough faith to make that adjustment in your scheme, that tells me you don't believe in him, and you should just move on to somebody else. That's it. And that takes us to number 2. If you are going to move on from Riley Leonard, even if it's just temporary while he gets healthy, or more permanent, the most likely option is Steve Angeli. Because you have a head football coach who has made it very clear that he wants you to do exactly what we tell you to do. Don't be a playmaker. Don't do anything outside of the offense. Do exactly what we tell you to do. Coaches like that don't then play freshmen or redshirt freshmen. Right. They're going to play someone with experience. And that sums up Steve Angeli. And to me, I know some people are going to hate this because they think Steve Angeli is this really good player, and I hope that they're right. But at the end of the day, if he is what I think he is, then he's kind of perfect for what they want, but that's also part of the problem because they don't want someone to take they're going to be totally fine if Steve Angeli comes in and throws a million checkdowns like he does in practice every time we go watch practice. But here's the thing. But if you're going to put Steve Angeli in the game, you kind of need to do this because here's the frustrating. Well, I guess it's not frustrating because it was a different coaching staff, but like what Gino Gaduli did in the bowl game with Steve Angeli is he made him have very simple reads. 1-2, check down. 1-2, run. And Steve handled himself well. Right? He did some things. So, if you're going to go to Steve Angeli, that's a temporary fix as you bridge the gap to what I'm confident they all believe is the future, which is Kenny or CJ, whoever the best of that duo is. My whole point is, if you're going to go to CJ, however, or Kenny or Steve, however, the same principle still applies. Starting one bowl game against a depleted team with a month to prepare does not mean you're going to be going out there and making the same reads Jaden Daniels made, right? So that same thing still applies, but at least this way, Steve gives you a little bit more of a style fit for what you're clearly looking for. Because Notre Dame's trying to run one offense that they then fit some Riley Leonard runs into. And it's not – the entire offense has to fit your quarterback, not just one part of it. And I think with what Steve does well, I think fits a little bit better what they'd like to do. But even there, they are going to have to simplify because this is a kid with one career start. Played well in that one career start. But you don't go ask him to go be Jaden Daniels because Jaden Daniels didn't become that guy at LSU until his second year as a starter. Jaden Daniels last year wasn't Jaden Daniels in year one. Mm-hmm. They had to build to that. And so if you're going to go to Steve, don't put – and here's the whole point. Don't put Steve in the same situation you put Riley in, which is we're going to run our offense and hope that you can execute it. If you're going to make this move to Steve and say, okay, what does Steve do well? Let's get to that. Let's build around that. Let's not keep calling plays we like and hope that he can execute it. Let's do something to get him rolling because they're going to have to get – if they make the move to Steve Angeli, then you have to come out early on and make sure that his confidence gets established early and he gets into an early rhythm. The same principle still applies, but if they don't have enough faith in Riley to make the changes to fit him, then they need to go with somebody else. And I think Steve Angeli is the most likely first option.
From a schematic standpoint, if Marcus Freeman pulls the trigger to start Steve Angeli, they're going to have to tailor the offense to him. And what did we just get done talking about? They're going to have to, I don't want to say regress, but dial back the offense a little bit for Riley Leonard to get him into a rhythm. So I think there's this misconception that you're going to go and put in Steve Angeli and he's going to be doing the reads and making the throws that Riley Leonard has shown that he can't make right now in the first two games. And I think that's a misconception that I think needs addressed because Notre Dame is not going to put Steve in a position where he is going to be asked to go make those multi-layered reads. To your point, in his one start in the bowl game, the reason why he was so successful is because the game was simplified, which is what we just got done talking about, what they need to do for Riley Leonard. So let's call the play calling style a wash, right? Because I think if Notre Dame wants to become a more effective team on offense, you simplify it, whether it's Leonard or Angeli, or if you make a move for the future in Kenny and CJ. So let's call play calling a wash. There is no argument, whether you think Steve is a better passer or if just whether it's fan banter and you think that he's just going to be the guy because you just need to see some sort of change to put the Band-Aid on the bullet hole of what happened last weekend. Steve Angeli is not as mobile and as good of an athlete as Riley Leonard. And that is no knock on Steve. We're talking about a kid in Riley Leonard that was talked about as getting drafted last year. Right? So the logical answer, if Riley Leonard gets the sample size in this week and they simplify his reads, or if he's not healthy enough to go, I think that Steve is the logical answer. And we talked about this a good amount in the preseason of what it would look like if worst case scenario, Riley Leonard doesn't pan out. Depending on the outcome of the Purdue game or what stuff looks like, I think you have to have a serious look at your quarterback room and think about, Sean brought it up in the post game. At what point do you pull the trigger to build for the future versus let's just limp through and see what we can do the rest of this year? So Steve would be the obvious choice because as much as I love Riley Leonard's dynamic playmaking ability, yes, Steve only has one start. That's one more start than Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr. And that's the reality of the situation. So then if you get to the point where you do believe that Steve is the guy, you're putting yourself in a spot where the offense is going to have to be simplified regardless. Like I said before, I think there's a misconception that you put Steve Angeli in and the offense is going to be this LSU type, Jaden Daniels type of offense. And that's just not reality, guys. I don't know where that narrative came from. And that's not a knock on Steve. No reasonable coach should ask your QB2 to go in and run this style of offense in his first start in a regular season game.
Moral of the story is, Trevor, no matter who the quarterback is, they're going to have to scale it a little bit from a read standpoint.
Yep.
Be more creative with the things that they're doing pre and post snap, mix up their personnel a little bit more, and design more things to get the ball in the hands of their playmakers in different ways. I mean, Northern Illinois did a phenomenal job of that.
Sure did.
I mean, they got Ontario Brown the ball in so many different ways: seam routes, jet sweeps, handoffs, fake a jet sweep to someone else, have him run a wheel route. I'm sitting there thinking they're doing that with him, but Notre Dame hasn't done any of that with Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other thing too, is if you have some things like that also takes pressure off your quarterback, where your quarterback, and again, we're not blaming the coaches for why Riley Leonard is struggling. We're simply saying he is struggling. That's the reality. This is what you need to do to correct course that he is struggling. That's what I'm saying. And that's what needs to get fixed. And so and if you're going to make the move, then you've got, as you mentioned, inexperienced quarterbacks. Option number 3, as we talked about, is just saying, hey, listen, the Riley Leonard experiment isn't working. And you're going to sit him. You're going to tell Riley, hey, listen, we're not going to play the rest of the year. You can take a red shirt, because Riley never had a red shirt, so he can red shirt this year, and you can go play somewhere else next year. But we're moving on to the future. And you play either Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr, whoever of that duo you think is your future quarterback. And then you just say, hey, listen, Marcus Freeman said it. We're going to run the football. We're going to have the quarterback do exactly what we tell him to do. Stay within that. Also can fit a younger player. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think he thinks it does, because he's so, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. I don't know that he's going to put a young quarterback in there unless he has to. But that could be the other option, because look, the one thing that we saw in fall camp that I don't think is really debatable is there's no question who throws the best balls in the team, who throws the best footballs on the team. It's the 2 young kids. They have the best arms. Kenny and CJ have the best arms. It's not even close. I mean, that's something that I've written about, talked about. Vince and I have talked about it. It's like those 2 kids throw great footballs. Can they read defenses? Can they handle the pressure? That's unknown. We don't know that about either one of them. But if this is who you are and this is what your offense is going to do, and you can't fix it, then you need to just say, hey, let's put the really talented young kids in and try to run the ball and get our playmakers the ball. And eventually, maybe by the time we get to the end of the year, these kids are rocking and rolling. I mean, that's kind of where we're at, man. It's really frustrating that we're having this conversation, but that's how bad quarterback play was on Saturday. And that's not off game bad. There's a problem bad. Yep. Every quarterback has an off game. Every single one. I've watched Peyton. I'm a John Elway fan. I've watched John Elway have bad games. I've watched Peyton Manning have bad games. I've watched Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Montana, Tom Brady. Everybody has bad games.
Sure.
Everybody. The question is okay, is it just a bad game, or are you going out and there's a bigger problem than just I had an off game? Right? I mean, that's what you have to kind of figure out. And I hope that they can kind of figure that out. We'll see. Sure. Like, I remember watching Bryce Young the year he won the Heisman was terrible for most of that Auburn game. Terrible. Just terrible. But you were kind of like, dude, the game before he had 559 passing yards, and the game after he threw for 421 yards and 3 touchdowns in the SEC title game against Georgia. Like, he's fine.
Yep.
He just had a bad game.
Sure.
That's not what was going on Saturday with Riley Leonard. There was something clearly not clicking, and he had no confidence in himself. It wasn't like he was off. Clean up your footwork, clean up your release point. He was mentally, and I broke. I mean, you saw the video I did on the site. I showed that he was missing this stuff against A&M as well. Mm-hmm. Just thought they'd clean it up and get it figured out, and it got worse in week 2. And so they're gonna have to figure it out. But look, option 3 is something that this staff needs to consider. If they don't think Riley's the guy, they need to have a very open and honest conversation about what the future holds at quarterback. And if you think Steve Angeli's your future, then go with Steve Angeli. But if you don't think he's your future, I don't think putting a Band-Aid on this thing does much. I say, look, put the young kids in, take your lumps, and maybe you can win some games with those guys if you're good enough on defense and good enough in these other areas and all that other kind of stuff. Then
I
gotta
think
make that move.
sure. My only hesitation with making the decision and pull the trigger on the young guys on the topic of you look to the future. Starting one of the young guys, I think, opens up a really big can of worms. And not from a talent perspective, right? Like, I also agree. I haven't been able to go and see them in practices, but what I saw from the blue gold game and some of the clips that the team releases and whatnot, there is no mystery that Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr throw the best football on the team. Some of the quarterbacks in the room say that.
Not even close.
Right. The thing that I would be interested to see is almost from a PR standpoint, how it's handled if you do decide to go with either a true freshman or a redshirt freshman.
I think that's the one thing that they could do to reignite the fan base. I mean, look, in the chat, you guys tell me if Notre Dame came out, all of you that are just, I'm over it. If Notre Dame came out tomorrow and said, hey, listen, we've made a decision. We feel that the guy that gives us the best chance to win, the guy that we're going to roll with because he's our present and our future, CJ Carr, we're starting him, or Kenny Minchie. Would that not kind of, even if you, hey, I'll take a couple bad games if it means we get to start that clock ticking. I mean, I think that would be the one thing that would fire the fan base up, to be honest with you. I mean, so talking about PR, Trevor, this was a great point. Like, yeah, that's something that could do it. Sure. And to me, I would feel this. I don't know if fans would. I would feel the same way if they decided, hey, we're going to go with Kenny. I would feel the same way with either one of those two.
Sure.
To be honest with you, because I think they're both incredibly talented players. So pick one. But like that's the only thing that would really, to me, get the fan base fired up. Now, there's like that pro Steve Angeli group that would want to see that, and that's fine. But I don't know that necessarily fires the fan. You don't make quarterback decisions based on what fires the fan base up. We're just saying like if you are concerned about that, that's the thing that gets everybody fired up. It's that right there. And then Steve gets a chance to go out and say, hey, listen, I'm the guy now. I'm going to prove, and this is what I said in my article, Steve Angeli needs to prove the doubters, like me, wrong with how he plays. He wouldn't be the first guy, So, like, I don't care what they do. They just got to say, hey, whoever we're going to roll with, we're going to, like, what I don't want them to do, Trevor, is just play musical chairs at quarterback. And just, we want to do this, and we're going to keep throwing someone in there until they can do what we want them to do. Pick a guy. The team needs to know who that guy is, and then build around him. That's the facts. And I honestly, at this point in time, don't really care who that quarterback is. It's like, if they decide that Steve Angeli's that guy, cool, let's roll. And you won't see a bigger person rooting for Steve Angeli than me, because I would love to be wrong about Steve Angeli.
Sure.
If he's the starting quarterback, then I want to be wrong because I want to see Notre Dame win. A, I'm a Notre Dame fan. B, it's good for business. And C, I don't mind being wrong when it's wrong about a kid saying that, like, I don't think it's good. I loved being wrong about Kyron Williams. Loved it. I'd love to be wrong about Steve, but you're not. If you don't build around Steve's specific skill set, then you're putting Steve in a position to fail. Just like you've kind of done that a little bit with Riley, to
Sure.
be honest with you.
Sure.
And so that's my thing is, no matter who you play, the offense needs to be tailored to him. You don't tailor him to what you want. And that's the key.
To your point, I think that's what scares me the most, is it would be really, I guess it comes from my lack of trust that the coaching staff as a whole would be willing to say, hey, you're the guy and you are the guy. And I think that's where a lot of my hesitation comes in with the third option that we're talking about here. Because I very easily could see it being something like, all right, we're going to give Kenny a shot. And then if Kenny doesn't work out, all right, well, CJ, let's see what you got. And then if it's, all right, well, the two young guys, that experiment was fun, but now it's, the team is past Louisville week and we're not getting the results that we want. Steve, let's see if you can go out and be the guy to salvage the season. That's my only fear with the third option. I guess I should have worded that better when I initially brought it up, but that's the musical chairs thing at quarterback. Or even if it's a game where you know what, we need more of a dynamic athlete at quarterback, and Notre Dame might need somebody to run the football. Hey, Riley, I know we kind of went away from you, but now's your chance at redemption to see. Like, I just hope to God, if they do make that decision, whether it's Steve, Kenny, CJ, I just hope that when they make that decision, that is their guy.
Yeah.
End of story.
Can I posit a different scenario for you?
Yeah.
Just give you something to chew on. Let's say that Notre Dame makes the decision one of two ways. Okay, Riley's not right physically, so he's not in the conversation for right now. Or he's just not the guy. Whatever. There's two ways you can kind of look at it. Number one is, hey, we're going to do the best we can with Riley for the next 3 weeks, see if we can get him going, because we clearly felt he was our best option. But we're going to groom the next guy, whether that's Kenny or Steve. And if Riley starts playing better, then you're good. You keep grooming that guy until that stops happening.
Sure.
And then you say, you get into the bye week and then say, okay, let's see where we're at. Same thing if you go with Steve. Hey, I can't justify putting CJ or Riley out on the field in their first game being against a Big Ten team, and then they got to play Louisville or whatever. Okay, fine. So let's say they decide they're going to go with Steve, and then for the next 3 weeks, it's like, okay, Steve, and then we're gonna prep for the next guy. I mean, that would be the only scenario where I would say I'm okay with them having a 2-quarterback system, is if that's what they're working towards. Not like, okay, Steve, good luck. He didn't get it done. Okay, who's next? So, like, in that regard, I'm agreeing with you. But if there's a plan to eventually turn the reins over to whoever that next guy is, that's the one scenario, Trevor, where I would be okay if that's what they decide to do. But again, I don't know that this staff has the foresight to think that far ahead, to be honest with you. And like, you even see it in the chat. Oh, CJ needs a year in the system and let him learn. Well, there's no better way to learn than to play. No better way to learn to play. And so, but I also don't know that you also don't want to throw to the people's point, but you also throw a guy in there too soon. He gets his confidence shook. Now you've got a problem. So like, it's not an easy answer either way. It's not an easy answer. Oh, just let him stay a year, because now you're saying what, his first game is next year at home against Texas A&M in year 2 of Mike Elko's defense.
Right.
Like, nice thing is, what's a tougher scenario for Kenny or CJ? That their first start is at home against Stanford, or on the road against Purdue, or at home against Texas A&M in the season opener between 2 ranked teams and a number 2, season number 2 under Mike Elko, with the recruiting he's going to do and the coaching he's going to do. So those are the different things that I look at and say, but here's the thing. It all comes down to have a plan.
Yep.
Have a plan to get the most out of your quarterback room. And that's what this all boils down to. Have a plan. Don't just, this is our offense and hopefully you guys can figure it out. Have a plan to say, this is what we need to do, and this is where we have to get with it.
I think, and this goes back to the conversation we had earlier, the biggest issue with the offense right now is lack of consistency. And so whatever quarterback they deem the best fit to be out there needs to give them the best chance at being consistent. And where my fear lies with that, and it sounds like you and I are on the same page with this, is then if your quarterback room starts being inconsistent in that how you decide to play them, if the entire root of the offense is inconsistent, that's where my concern starts to come in. But I do think that there is a very viable scenario where you look to the future and you say, you know what, like, regardless of what happens, and I don't want to think too far down the road or get, the cart too far in front ahead of the horse here, but, people talk about the transfer portal all the time. No matter what move that you go with, like going into next year, like somebody is like, odds are, just the way that the state of college football is, somebody's going to leave. And so that'd be another task for the coaching staff, is accepting that depending on who you go with, you're going to lose something.
Yes. So go with what's best for your football team.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to lose Steve because you put Kenny or CJ in, then if that's what you think is the best present and future move, then do that. If you think somebody's going to leave, one of the young guys is going to leave because you put Steve in, if he's your best guy for now and the future, then you make that move.
Yep. 100%.
My hope, what I would do and we'll kind of wrap this part up with what I would do, Trevor,
Yeah.
is because I actually kind of think we talked a lot about what the offense needs to do. We'll talk a little bit more about that, and then the defense. So that is the next section. But wrapping this part up, to me, if you want to know what I would do, it's my personal opinion. If Riley Leonard is healthy to play, I would still go with Riley Leonard, because I still think Riley Leonard at his best still gives this football team in 2024 your best chance to win.
Yep.
So what I would do is I would lean into what gets Riley correct, because here's the thing. In some ways, this shoulder injury, if you handle it right, could be a blessing in disguise for him, because it forces you to really get nitty-gritty about what makes him successful as a passer. You can't build around his run game anymore.
Right.
You got to really say, okay, he's our guy. This is the stuff he's comfortable with. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. The stuff you and I talked about, we're going to move the pocket. Here's a thought. Last I checked, they didn't outlaw play action passes. So you're still allowed to do those. Notre Dame, that's still allowed. You're allowed to move the pocket. I thought they might have banned it, but then I watched Northern Illinois do some bootlegs on Saturday, and they didn't throw flags. So I was like, oh, they must still be allowed to run bootlegs and stuff. And those kind of worked pretty well for Northern Illinois on Saturday. I hope people are picking up the sarcasm. I didn't actually think. Some guys like, Driscoll thought that they banned bootlegs, idiot. But like, do some of that, because you know what's great about bootlegs? It's a real simple read. Got that run. That's it. But that and that's off of the same guy. If this guy comes up, I throw that. If this guy goes back, I throw this. And if he tries to play both, I run. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
So it's multiple options, but it's off of basically one read. Do some of that and try to get Riley going. And if he doesn't get going, what I'm doing in the meantime is we're sitting down as a staff, and we're having some real thorough, long conversations about who's our future.
Yep.
And consequences be darned, to your point, Trevor. That's our future. That's our future. We have to accept the fact that somebody's going to leave if we think this guy's our future.
Totally.
And that's somebody's going to leave, whether it's Steve, Kenny, or CJ. I personally think Kenny or CJ gives them the best chance to win long term. Whoever that is. I think CJ is the best of that group, but if Kenny outplays them, significantly outplaying them right now, okay, cool. I'm comfortable rolling with Kenny as well. I think they're both excellent players.
Totally.
I would stick with Riley, build around him as I'm bringing those guys along. And then basically let's see how these next 3 games go. And if Riley's not that guy and he can't get it going, then I've got the bye week and to get my new guy in there to get ready for Stanford.
Yep.
Because that's basically kind of where it's at is, maybe you can work that guy in. I would still give Riley a shot to kind of do what he needs to do. But you come out of that bye week and you've got Stanford at home. You've got a good Georgia Tech team, but a Georgia Tech team that's not great on defense. You've got Navy before Florida State. That's a nice stretch of 3 games to get that guy right before Florida State comes to town. Or it's a nice stretch of games where Riley can get going if the 3-game stretch really worked and got him going. That's what I would do. What say you, Trevor?
I agree. I wanted to pose this question back to you because I'm curious on what your thought is here.
Oh, I like that. Most guys don't do that. I'm digging that. Let's do it. Bring it.
Yeah. I'm curious because we looked at Notre Dame got the win against Texas A&M despite subpar quarterback play from Riley Leonard. What situation do you have? Because I am all for giving Riley Leonard a shot to prove that he can be the guy and be effective in this offense. Notre Dame, just from a talent perspective, looking at the entire team as a whole, is talented enough, even if Riley Leonard has a bad game, to beat Purdue and beat Miami of Ohio. What happens if Riley Leonard in the next 2 games does not play where you need him to with a simplified offense, but Notre Dame still wins? How do you evaluate it from that standpoint? What are your thoughts there? Because to me, the answer gets a lot more simple if Notre Dame drops a game to Purdue because of quarterback play. Sure, there will be more issues than just Riley Leonard being the issue.
Sure.
For why
but it's made very easy to go with your future now.
Totally. But if they win and they win these next 2 games, but you're still looking at it of, does Riley give us the best shot to beat Louisville and Florida State and USC? What do you do in that situation?
So basically, if you come out this weekend and he doesn't play well,
but still win.
But you still win,
Mm-hmm.
I would still I'd have him start against Miami of Ohio, and I wouldn't tell him this, but I would kind of have my next guy kind of mentally ready to go. And now that he's got the injury, it's perfect because you can say, look, we got to make sure this guy's ready in case you can't play. Your shoulder's banged up.
Sure.
And just kind of see how he goes against Miami of Ohio. That's what I would do. I would have a little bit of a longer leash because, again, I want to see if I can get him going because he does give you the best chance to win.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know that I'm ready to put that guy in for Louisville, right? Because, like, you could say, okay, if he plays poorly again this weekend, then it's just like, okay, it's time to make the move. Let that guy's first start be against Miami of Ohio, and then Louisville's game number 2. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I just kind of think let's see what Riley can do these next couple weeks. Have that guy ready in case you need to, but then during the bye week is when we make the official move. That's where we're at, and we're going to really lean into our run game and defense, and the quarterback doing executing what Coach Denbrock wants and stuff like that. That's probably the way I would go. Now, if he proves he's not the guy in that he plays equally as bad as he did this past week, that's a bit of an extreme circumstance that I would say, okay, there's seriously something wrong and it's not getting any better.
Sure.
You got to make a move. Like, and I love Riley Leonard as a player. And if he plays that way on Saturday, I'd just say, Notre Dame broke him. But just because they broke him doesn't mean you keep playing them.
Sure.
Like, and the other thing too is I'm also going to look out for Riley Leonard. Hey man, something's wrong here. We're going to take you off the field. We're going to redshirt you. And so you can go somewhere else next year and have a year to get it right.
Totally.
Because he's out of eligibility this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so there comes a point in time where you're not only looking out for your team, you're looking out for Riley, and making that move after game 5, you've now screwed that kid over. So that might be something, Trevor, that has to factor into this conversation for them is, okay, if he's not your guy, give him the red shirt. You move on to your future. So now Riley can save that year and then, transfer somewhere that maybe is a better fit and get his career back on track. Now you're doing what's best for you and you're looking out for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's something to at least consider. If he plays that, if he shows progress but still doesn't play great against Purdue, I'm rolling with him. Because you basically have to do Miami of Ohio before his eligibility is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Minute you play him against Louisville, it's over. So that kind of got me thinking, Trevor. So I actually kind of think that's how I'd look at it, is how, and it's not just about how he plays. If he's a little off, but I just look in his eyes and he's, because this, Trevor, right? Did you coach football as well, correct? I know you played it, but
slightly. It was more from a volunteer standpoint,
okay.
But I went back to the high school and helped.
But you can look in a kid's eyes and say, okay, he's good. He's just not playing well, but he's good. Then you can look in a guy's eyes and say, that ain't good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember a Notre Dame coach telling me before the Georgia game in 19, I was talking to a Notre Dame coach a couple weeks after the game. He said, I had a bad feeling going into that last drive. I said, really? Because I didn't think we were going to win. So what? I was like, tell me why. He goes, I knew we could, but when I was in the huddle, I looked around and nobody believed that they were going to go down and score. And there was nothing I could tell them that was going to change that. They didn't believe in themselves. And you can just see it if you've been coaching long enough, you see that.
Yeah.
And if you've been coaching long enough, you know the difference between real bravado and false bravado. And so, like, if I'm looking in Riley's eyes and he's good, he's just got to get into a rhythm. As soon as he gets rolling, he's going to go off. Because mentally, I see it. He's locked in. He's confident. He's going to be okay. He's just in the funk right now. But if you look in his eyes and you see what you saw, because that was my biggest concern. I saw in the fourth quarter of the A&M game, you can look at where he's smiling, he's laughing, he's having fun. I got this, fellas. And then he went out and did exactly that. Made the throws he needed to make. I'm watching this kid on Saturday, and I see a kid that was panicked.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly there was something up here that had him, he didn't know what was going on. And so if you see that again Saturday, if he makes some bad reads again, you can fix that.
Yep.
But you've got to be able to look in his eyes and say, is he at least confident up here? If he's not, then you're almost forced to make a move. You can't keep putting a kid out there that doesn't have faith in himself. If he doesn't trust himself, he's not going to trust me. He's not going to trust his teammates. So all that factors into it. So that's kind of where I'm at with that one. And so, yeah, now I would say these next 2 weeks are going to be huge, huge. And if Riley's not the guy and you're going to make the move, you may not. Like, I'm all for you got to do what's best for your team first, but I'm also, you got to try to look out for the young people as well.
Sure.
And if you really don't think Riley's the guy, maybe you make the move a little sooner than I previously said, because now you're looking out for Riley because of what I said earlier. Is you can now save a year of eligibility, because he played as a true freshman in 21.
Yep.
He played as a true sophomore in 22, a true junior last year. He's a true senior this year. So this is his 4th and final year, unless there's an injury or something where you redshirt him, because he doesn't just need the injury to redshirt. He has a pure redshirt left.
Yeah.
He took no redshirt at Duke. So it's not like he redshirted in 2020, was a redshirt freshman in 21, et cetera, et cetera. And now to save a year, he needs the injury. He can redshirt just because he could walk in the room and say, I won't play anymore. I want you to redshirt me. And they'd be able to redshirt him.
Yep.
So yeah, if the look's that not there in the next week, then I think you have to start seriously having a very long conversation with him about his future, and say, hey, look, we thought about trying to ride you through the Louisville game, but we think we're ready for a change, and we didn't want to play you 5 games in, and then you don't have an opportunity to come back and play for someone next year. So I'm not talking about redshirting him and having him be at Notre Dame again next year. I'm talking about redshirting him and giving him a chance to go somewhere else. I think that would be the right thing to do if he doesn't bounce back. The ideal scenario is that Riley bounces back,
yes,
and he gets back to being the Riley Leonard that he was.
Totally.
That's the ideal scenario for me. That's the perfect world situation for me. But if he doesn't, then you've got to think long and hard, because at the end of the day, Trevor, the whole point of this conversation is you need to get this position rolling. It's going to help this football team. It's going to help next year's football team, and it's going to be huge for recruiting. You've got to get this team rolling. And right now, you can fix a lot of if you fix everything else about Saturday and the quarterback plays poorly, you still beat Northern Illinois. If Riley Leonard plays as bad as he did on Saturday, but the receivers play better, the play calling is better, the defense plays better, they win. But it doesn't change the fact that quarterback is going to get you beat at some point. They didn't lose that game because of Riley Leonard, but if everybody plays great and Riley Leonard plays that well against Louisville, they're going to get beat. Like how well the defense plays. And so you can't keep playing like that. So you've got to get it fixed. And just throwing out Steve Angeli and doing the same crap you did with Riley Leonard is setting Steve up to fail, just like it would be setting Kenny up to fail or CJ up to fail. You've got to be more willing to say, we've got to adapt to what our talent's really good at right now.
Yep.
And I don't know that they're doing that. They're not doing that with Chris Mitchell. They're not doing that with Riley Leonard. They're not doing that with Jeremiah Love. They did it a little bit against Texas A&M. But right now, your 3 best football players on offense, and you tell me if you disagree, right now. Now, taking Mitchell Evans out because he's not a full-time player yet, although he did play a lot more on Saturday. But, like, just outside of Mitchell, your 3 best players are very clearly, very obviously, very just not even just a discussion. Jeremiah Love, Bo Collins, and Jadarian Price.
Yeah.
Now, you need – actually, you know what? Let's save that for the next segment. Let's put it – point is, quarterback play has to get a lot better, and they can't just keep doing what they're doing and have a short leash for Riley and then pull him and put somebody else in and keep doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Because what you're doing is wrong, and it's not working, and you broke a talented quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fact. And so an altering of course is needed no matter who your quarterback is.
Sure.
And that's where I'm at.
Yep. I'm in the same boat. You can't definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result. And something has to change. With the quarterback position specifically, you need to do things no matter who is under center to simplify the game for them. And that's the common theme. That doesn't mean only throw screens and only hand the ball off of inside zone. There are things that you can do creatively within that style of offense to get your quarterback into a rhythm. But it's not as simple as, well, we need to get the ball in the hands of our playmakers. Bo Collins is one of them. We'll just throw him a now screen. Why? Got to get the ball in the hands of Jeremiah Love. So we'll just run inside zone until he does something immaculate and breaks one open. But I know we'll dive into that here soon. For the quarterback specifically, what they need to do is, one, I'm with you. They need to give Riley Leonard more of a shot to be successful, not more of a shot to be the starter. Yes. They need to do things that favor his skill set and do things to get him in a rhythm
that he's comfortable with.
Yes. And whether that's Riley or whether that's Steve or Kenny or CJ, I think that narrative is the same regardless. Or else you are putting young guys in a position who will definitely fail. I can kind of understand why, you gave Riley Leonard the keys to this very expensive car and you're like, we expect that you'd be able to run this offense to its full capabilities. But now we're going to see what adjustments you can make as a coach, right? To say, hey, this is where we thought he was going to be. Riley's not there yet. Here's our answer for this. But if you go out and you do the same thing and you're just expecting that miraculously in 6 days, Riley Leonard is just going to get better, that's crazy. And that sets him up for failure. But that's why I wanted to ask you that, because, and I love where you took it with the redshirting thing, because at the end of the day, Riley Leonard was voted a captain of this football team by his peers, by his players. So he is a well-respected kid, and knowing that the program did him a service of, you're not our guy, but that doesn't mean that you can't be somebody else's guy. We're going to redshirt you. Still gives him the opportunity to be around a team and groom some of the younger guys if they do take that route. But yeah, in a whole, in looking at this in a vacuum, simplify the offense, get your quarterback in a rhythm so he's then comfortable, then start chunking away and open up the offense from there.
So let's get into part 3, Trevor, and this will be a little bit quicker of a shorter segment. What are some things that Notre Dame needs to do to get rolling on offense and defense moving forward? And we'll start with the offense, and then we'll finish things up with the defense. And so part 1, when you look at the offense, we talked about you got to get the quarterback going. Okay, that's a given, but that's not the only answer. Or there are some answers that are good for other things that will then also help the quarterback. One thing is I get as a coach, like, fans only saw A&M in Northern Illinois, and they just think, well, that must be what was happening every single day. And I've tried to explain to people, that's not how football works. You have some guys that are really good in practice. They're not good on Saturdays. You've had some guys that aren't very good in practice, and they're great on Saturdays. I've coached players like that. Best receiver I ever coached was a mediocre practice player physically. Mentally, he was locked in, but physically, he was a super tightly wound athlete. Couldn't get as loose on practice days as he would get on game day. When for whatever it was, the adrenaline of game day would loosen him up a lot more than it was on practice. I had another kid who just couldn't mentally lock in the same way he did on. I mean, he'd legitimately 50-50 in practice on contested throws. And then you'd get into game day and it was like 90-10. If it got thrown up to him, he was coming down with it. I mean, that's just the way that it is. So they clearly saw something in this football team in practice and said, hey, let's keep rolling it. Okay. I mean, you don't win the Jersey scrimmage playing the way that you did against Northern Illinois, right? You just don't. And I saw things in practice that were way better than what we saw against Northern Illinois. But you now have 2 games of evidence of, okay, here's where we're not as good as we thought, but here's some guys that are really playing well. And the first thing that they need to do offensively is lean more into the proven playmakers. If you go into the next game and Jeremiah Love has less than 15 touches and Jadarian Price has less than 10, you did it wrong, with one exception. Jeremiah Love averaged 11 yards a carry. Jadarian had 5 carries for 112 yards. You get what I'm saying? Like, okay, I couldn't get him 15 touches. He kept freaking breaking them for long run. Okay, cool. You know what I mean? But like, that's not what happened on Saturday against Northern Illinois. If those two kids aren't combining, I'll just say this. If those two kids aren't combining for a minimum of 20, 25 touches, pass game, run game, all capacities, then you're not doing something right. And so that requires not that you just give them more inside zone handoffs, but mix it up a little bit. Like I'd be looking at Northern, like all coaches do this. I watched this team do this against our defense, and I freaking love it for us because we've got – so, like, you think about a jet sweep action where you've got Jeremiah Love running a jet sweep. You give him that a couple times, and the next thing you know, you got Jadarian Price running a seam route or a wheel route like Northern Illinois did, and you think they're going to be running with Jadarian Price? Or here's the thought. You run Jadarian Price on a wheel route first. If it hits, now all of a sudden they're running with him as Jeremiah is running around outside of them. Mm-hmm. Do some things like that. Get more creative. Do more things that are faster. Everything that they're doing right now is slow. It's all slow, right? Do more high-low stuff. Do more, and I know Denbrock has it in his offense. Everything they're doing right now is slow. And a big reason why is on top of doing more to get your guys the ball, you need to also – simplification doesn't just help with Riley Leonard. I'm going to repeat again. 9 starters that are freshman or sophomore eligibility, and they're all in a new offense. Your 2 veterans, Riley Leonard and Bo Collins, are really in their first semester of really getting action with this football team. They're all new to this. Chris Mitchell is clearly not comfortable with what you're doing. Jaden Greathouse is not as comfortable he was in the spring. He needs to figure some stuff out. But here's the thing. You've got to do more to you've got to be intentional about getting your playmakers of football. What we're seeing right now is they're just running concepts, and then you got to read it and get – that's fine. Got to have that. There needs to be a little bit more to say, hey, Riley, Steve, Kenny, CJ, whoever the heck is at quarterback, Anthony Rizak, whoever's a quarterback, on this play, we're throwing the ball to number 10. The only way we don't is if they line up like this, and then we're going here. But this play is going to 10. And people say, well, you can't do that. Yes, you can. Coaches do that all the freaking time. I watched John Elway and Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak do that in a Super Bowl. We're designing this whole play to throw a post route to Rod Smith because of how Eugene Robinson is coming down and treating this certain bootleg action. Do you ever seen that on NFL films? Mm-hmm. They're spending a whole series designing one because they knew on that play, based on we know that when we line up like this and run this action, this guy's doing this. And there's one read. That's in the NFL. You don't think you can do that in college? You can't manipulate a defender in college? Of course you can. And Mike Denbrock did a lot of that at LSU. He needs to show more faith in his players, in my opinion, now at Notre Dame and say, hey, Chris Mitchell, we're not going to be the team we need to be if you don't get going. Yep. Right? Jaden Greathouse, we're not going to be the team that we need to be if you're catching 3 balls and averaging less than 10 yards a catch. Right? We got to do more to get you to rock. And, Bo Collins, same thing, a little bit more to him. You've got the talented players. You've got to do more to get them to rock. You talk about why did Jaden Greathouse drop that ball? I don't know why. Maybe because he's not getting the ball a lot. He put a lot of pressure on himself. I got a chance to go make a big play. When if he's kind of a more of a normal part of the offense like he was in the spring, maybe he could have just dropped it. That happens, though. I've seen Will Fuller drop balls. You don't go away from them. It happens. So you've got these talented players. You've got to do more to design things to give them the ball. Because simplification works for everybody. And you know who else simplification works for, Trevor? The offensive line.
Yep.
So be more simplified with your run stuff between the tackles. Here's the thing about a jet sweep. Your offensive line doesn't have to do a whole lot. They get beat, it doesn't matter. You're running outside of them. You know what I mean? There's some things that you can do that kind of take the pressure off of them that they don't have to dominate every single play.
Sure.
And so I think there's things like that. Simplify your scheme, get more complex with your movement. That's what I would say, because movement is a lot easier to learn and adjust. Hey, we're going to do this a million different ways, but it's still zone. It's still smash. It's still this. We're just going to run smash out of with motion. We're going to run a long motion. We're going to run smash with a short motion. We're going to smash with a stack. We're going to post snap switch it. We're going to do all types. We're going to do one with our running back. We're going to go a 3-by-1 and run the corner route from our running back and try to open that up with a backside over route. But just get creative with it, but it's still smash.
Mm-hmm.
For your quarterback, it's still smash. And those are things that I would like to see more of, Trevor, is push the tempo, be more creative pre-snap, get your guys the ball, but overall, schematically, do more pre-snap and with your looks and less with the volume of scheme until your kids get comfortable. And then once the light goes on, then you can start adding more and more and more to it, because this isn't a recipe to go beat Georgia, guys. This is not the recipe to go beat USC at the end of the year. It's not the recipe to beat Texas or Alabama. It's a freaking recipe to beat Purdue that then will serve benefits to getting your guys going so you can then be in position to beat Louisville and those type of teams. And so to me, offensively, that's a big part of what I want to see from this team on Saturday.
I would love to see Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price on the field at the same time. We heard a lot about that in the offseason. And
unfortunately, it was us saying they should do it.
Sure.
Not them doing it.
Sure. But if I'm Mike Denbrock, to build off of what you were saying pre-snap, one of the biggest things that you can do, even if I don't know why Notre Dame goes away from motion, against Northern Illinois like they did. Yes, be active pre-snap. Some of that goes into the personnel that's on the field. And Notre Dame has put themselves in a position where, to our point earlier, they have 3 bona fide playmakers, 4, 24, and 5, right? So if I'm somebody on defense and I'm looking at that, you as an offensive coordinator need to put the defense in a position where they have to be prepared to game plan for multiple people, right? It's no mystery that when you trot, and I hope he starts to break open. I hope he starts to build on the season. But when I'm trotting Chris Mitchell out there, who has maybe 5 or 6 targets through 2 games, if I'm looking at it as a defensive player, that's not a threat right now. It's not. Notre Dame knows how fast Chris Mitchell is, and Notre Dame knows how explosive he is. The other teams haven't seen that, but they've seen how explosive Bo Collins can be in one-on-one jump ball situations. They've seen how explosive Jeremiah Love is. They've seen how explosive Jadarian Price is. If I'm Mike Denbrock, I'm looking at stuff of putting Jeremiah Love in the slot, which they did against Texas A&M. Had him run a slot fade. I'm lining him up. You want to send somebody in motion, send Jeremiah Love in motion. Jadarian Price is in the backfield. Just make it to where they pre-snap, the defense have to be ready and prepared to game plan for multiple different outcomes. Yeah. This could be one of those little touch passes to Jeremiah Love. This could be a zone read. It could be anything.
Let me give you an example from my own coaching career that talks about, like, you gotta have some creativity.
Yep.
So we're playing my alma mater, Salisbury, in the playoff in 2004, and they're undefeated. It's at their place. This is obviously a big game for me because it's my alma mater. So we're playing them, and I saw that, hey, they go twins over. Corners on twins over. So if we go twins, they go corners over, on twins. So if we went out on the field and went 21 personnel, 2 backs, we had a fullback, tight end, and 2 receivers, and we go twins, so the 2 receivers are away from the tight end, they will put both corners over. Their safety, I played with the kid. He's a good hitter, can't run. So what we did is this. We lined up in 21 personnel and went twins. We put our running back in the slot. We put our fastest receiver, George Jones, in at running back. Motioned him out. Safety went out. Touchdown. So then you know what we did? You know what they're going to do next, right? They're going to cheat that safety over even more. So we did the same thing. We're trying to put this game away. We motioned George out, ran double post backside, hit our backside post because we knew they were going to exaggerate, take that other safety over, come down, roll that safety over, and the backside post is going to open up, right? Like, you got to be thinking. We've never done that at all during the season. But I said, look, when they do this, we know that we can then get a matchup. So, like, okay, twins over, Jeremiah Love in the slot. Maybe you put Jaden Greathouse in the backfield or Chris Mitchell in the backfield to try to get some. If you get that type, that's only if it works. Twins, right?
Sure.
This is an example. and you motion him out. Now he's matched up against a linebacker. Like he did that a little bit against A&M. You know, like against A&M, they did that with the slot fade where they motioned him out in the slot and ran the slot fade in the end zone. But then we don't see it at all against Northern Illinois. And that goes back to where I really think the lack of preparation, the lack of that last day of practice where you're doing a lot of your situational stuff, a lot of 7-on-7, I think really hurt this football team.
Yeah.
Because we saw less creativity against Northern Illinois than we did against Texas A&M. To a degree, it's like, okay, yeah, because they're better. But, like, you've got to do more to get those guys to football. There's no excuse for Jadarian Price only have 3 touches on Saturday. And Jeremiah Love only touched the ball once. And I heard all Marcus Freeman's answers. They're bad answers. And I think he's saying it to protect his coaches. I don't think he actually believes that.
Agreed.
But the point is, you've got these guys doing certain things. Let them do it. Use them. Do more creative things to get them in good matchups. And I just want to see a little bit more of that. When your offense is struggling, you have to even be more so into that type of thing to get them going. And that's my point is like, and sometimes it's not something that you're going to use every week. It's game specific stuff, but you have to look at the point of the example I shared, Trevor, was it's not that, hey, if you guys do this in the game, it's going to work. No, this is from 2004. It's 20 years ago. The point is the principle behind it. We knew that if we lined up in this personnel and this alignment, they weren't going to be smart enough to recognize that's the running back. They're going to, now they might if it was Audric Estime, but Roland Hilliard looked like our slot receiver. I mean, you know what I mean? Jeremiah Love kind of looks like their slot receivers.
Sure.
So you do that first time you do it, they may not, they're just going to see twins. So you kind of go up and you just, and they, you know, but then if they don't and they keep their corner over, now you've got Jeremiah Love matched up against the safety or linebacker to the other side. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
So like those are things that I would look at and say, you got to have some of that creativity. And if you're not going to do that, then I don't know what to tell you. You've got all these weapons. You've got, well, they're not Malik Neighbors. They don't have to be. Antonio Brown isn't. Trayvon Rudolph isn't. And that worked pretty freaking well against a really good defense on Saturday.
Yeah, I would say so.
Do that. Be willing to, the offense needs to be, how can I do things to make sure that we're getting our best players to football in space? And you can still run your concepts, but there needs to be, it's not an either or, it's both. You got to do both. And that's what I want to see from the offense. And I think that would help the offensive line out as well, because you can somewhat, with the movement, you know, some rollouts, some bootlegs, things like that. Bootlegs are going to give you more protection bodies. Rollouts are going to, like, hey, it's hard for an offensive line to screw up a bootleg. It really is, especially a naked. It's hard for an offensive line to screw up a sprint out. It really is. They can, but that's one less pass pro than Anthony Knapp has to worry about going against a 290-pound defensive end. You know what I mean? So it's just, you got a young group. Simplify. Let them get some confidence, then build on it. But up the tempo. Go faster. That's also my final key, Trevor. That's my rant. Let's have at it. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I want to see the tempo increased. They did it on the first drive of the game, and what do you know? They scored on the first drive of the game. It's fantastic. Then the rest of the game, they went away from it. I want to see some sort of offensive rhythm in play calling from Mike Denbrock. Felt like against the in the Northern Illinois game, it was kind of just, let's just run this play and see if it works, instead of, I'm setting this play up now to bring it back later. And Mike Denbrock is a genius play caller. I've watched games of his before in the past where it is that chess match of, you know, I'm setting this up now, or I have this personnel grouping out now because I'm going to refer back to it later when we need something because we have a favorable look, right? I want to see that. I want to see a simplified game plan across the board for everybody, not just for the quarterback. Simplified for the offensive line, right? And just from an overall schematic standpoint, get the ball in the hands of your playmakers in favorable situations. Don't just run inside zone, and then just wait for Jeremiah Love to break it, because odds are he will at some point. That's what he showed us the first 2 games. But that's not going to get anybody. Right, 100%.
Right.
But that's just not going to get anybody in a rhythm. One of the next things I want to see is getting the tight ends more involved. And I know that's going to be kind of shades of 22 and 23, but I think the difference is in 22 and in 23, like you kind of had to do that, get your tight ends involved to move the ball. With this offense and the personnel that you do have at wide receiver with Bo Collins, with Chris Mitchell, with Jaden Greathouse, with Jaden Thomas, who was apparently absent on Saturday schematically, but the difference is this year Notre Dame doesn't have to go to their tight ends for the only source of offense like they had to in 22 with Michael Mayer.
Shouldn't have to. That kind of did rear its ugly head on Saturday. It's like every third down, they're like, let's throw it to Mitchell Evans.
Yep.
And it worked because Mitchell's really good, but teams are going to figure that out a little bit. Sorry.
Totally. No, you're good. So I want it to be more complementary. That's what I want to see because you have the ability to make it that way, right? With the personnel groupings that you have and you can put on the field. So in a nutshell, the things that I'm looking for, get the ball in the hands of your playmakers, simplify the offense, and be creative pre-snap with the personnel groupings that you put out, with the pre-snap motion that you have, because the pre-snap motion meshed with Notre Dame's defense and what Northern Illinois was able to do, and Notre Dame's defense is one of the best in the country. Still believe that after what happened against Northern Illinois, because at the end of the day, the defense didn't play great, but they still gave the offense opportunities to win, just not when it mattered the most at the end of the game on the final drive. But those are going to be the three big things that I'm looking for on offense to your point, jumpstart where we're, what we have been talking about, what Notre Dame needs to do for the rest of the season.
Let's talk defense, Trevor. And a lot of the defensive stuff, it's just be more focused, tackle better, limit the mental mistakes, a lot of that stuff. But there is one thing that has gone on in both games that needs to get addressed. They have to figure out their run defensive plan. I understand Al Golden's philosophy is I don't really care about being a top 10 run defense. And what he means by that is not, I don't care if people run the ball on it. That's not what he's talking about. What he's saying is, we're not going to care about holding teams to 70 yards rushing and being the number one rush defense. We're going to be good against the run, but we're going to be a team that's prepared to be multiple. And because if you're so focused on that, then you run the risk of, if you don't have elite athletes, you could get thrown on. And Notre Dame does have elite athletes, but I'm okay with it. But you also can't do what we've seen the first two games, where A&M kind of wrote the book on Notre Dame in the second half, and Illinois said, thank you, we will use that. Mm-hmm. And went out and did the same exact thing. And the answers that we got is, well, they were just running this stretch play. Like, I'm sorry, how are you not – you can't defend a stretch play? Purdue is going to go right to that same game plan. They've got a mobile quarterback, but they ran for over 240 yards in their first game. And that is a team that they're going to watch. Purdue's got some decent receivers. They are not going to watch this game and say, hey, let's go try to throw the ball all over Notre Dame's defense. No. They're going to take Devin Mockabee, Elijah Jackson, who had 3 carries for 83 yards, Reggie Love, and they're going to run those guys. Mm-hmm. And they're going to run those guys a lot. Hudson Card's going to have some bootlegs and they're going to watch that game plan and say, we're going to make Notre Dame learn how to defend that stuff, because they didn't do it again. They didn't adjust to it against A&M. They didn't adjust to it against Northern Illinois. Part of it's personnel. If you're going to have Kurt Heinisch in the game, you need to let him be a penetrator, not a space eater.
Yep.
You need your defensive tackles overall to play better.
Yep.
Coach Freeman said that they are playing fine. That is, I hope, coach speak, because they're definitely not. Your defensive ends have to be a lot more consistent setting the edge, certainly. And you need to have more aggressive run stunts against those. So if they want to try to get a stretch, then here's what you do. Hey, Drake, if you see them running stretch to you, you're a B-gap guy. You run as hard as you can into that guard and blow that joker up, because you're not necessarily the ball stopper here. You're the B-gap defender on this stunt. You run into that guard as hard as you can, hopefully knock him back into the track. Right? I mean, like, that's what disruption does. And I want to see more of that from them. They have to be more aggressive against, like, to me, it's like, because you have the elite secondary you need to be able to commit more resources to the run until your front shows that they can handle it. Otherwise, these teams are going to keep playing ball control. They're going to keep playing keep away from your offense. They're going to continue to control the momentum and time of the game, and they're just going to keep running at you. Northern Illinois did such a great job of staying on schedule, Trevor, of just constantly being in third and short, second and short, to where they could just, and I said it again, they helped Notre Dame out by throwing on fourth down. I don't know why they did that. I would have lined up. I said this. I'd have gone five tight ends, and my running back in that 5 tight end, one running back wildcat they were doing, and just run it right at you and made you stop us.
Yeah.
And they decided to throw, and it's like Notre Dame's like, cool, this is what we want you to do. But Notre Dame also has to do some more things to try to force teams out of running the ball with numbers, and they didn't do that on Saturday. So they're going to have to find some answers in a hurry with their run defense, because they got manhandled by Northern Illinois. Purdue's not quite as big as Northern Illinois, but some teams on the schedule down the road are. You need to find some answers and find them fast. That's really the only thing. The defense didn't play great on Saturday, but they weren't locked in. The run game struggling for 2 straight games is a bit of a concern for me, to be honest with you. That's my only really big structural concern right now. What say you?
I'm in the same boat as you. I need to see more penetration on the defensive line. In the Texas A&M game, the 2 ends, more specifically Jordan Botelho, did a really good job of coming flat down the line and blowing up some of those stretch plays or inside zone plays, which I would like to see more of. But I would just like to see Al Golden and Al Washington really let the D-line loose, instead of, trying to hold leverage and waiting for the linebackers to scrape over and gap fill, which you still have to do regardless. You'll have your running assignments 100%. But this is a younger linebacker group, more athletic, bigger than what you were at last year. But if there's one thing that J.D. Bertrand last year was really good at doing, is it was going and filling those run assignments. And Bowen has had his moments where he's been there. You had that viral play of what he did on that counter play against Texas A&M. That's fantastic.
He said others like that.
Yeah.
But moments.
Yep. Right. Again, it's the biggest theme, which I know we'll talk about throughout the week, is just that overall consistency. It's not good enough anymore to do it some of the time.
Trevor, that's why I feel like they need to be a little bit more aggressive with their stunts. Because what we saw on Saturday was, and this was true of Drake, it was true of Kingston, it was true of Sneed, it was true of Alsbury, is there was way too much passiveness with the linebackers. And that's why I say, you need to get your safety down a little bit so you can be more aggressive crashing your linebackers and run stunts. Because you need, with the way that, and I don't know that Purdue is going to do this as much. I would if I was their OC, but they didn't show me as much of the craziness that Northern Illinois did. I'm going to have to go rewatch that game. I didn't study it and break it down yet like I did Northern Illinois last week. I will later tonight. But that stuff really messed with the linebackers. But other teams are going to see that and say, hey, that really messed with the linebackers. And so you're going to have to be prepared to kind of, launch them a little bit and allow them to be more aggressive. Maybe you do some more things where you slant the D-line inside and let Drake crash off the edge a little. I mean, there's different things you can do, but the reality is you're going to have to find answers. And just doing better at what you're doing is not a good plan, because I think the plan is structurally flawed.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
I agree. It almost feels like they're playing with the same linebacking core that they had in the previous year, which you don't. And there are some pros to that, and there are some cons to that. And we're seeing the cons in the run game right now, unfortunately. So for me, I think it's getting creative with the D-line, and I'll take it a step further into the personnel groupings that you're putting out onto the field as well, and what you're asking that personnel grouping to do. Donnie Heinisch is a really good defensive tackle. Don't get it twisted. But you can't ask him to do the things that you would ask a Gabriel Rubio to do. They're just 2 different style of players. That's not a knock on Gabe Rubio, and that's not a knock on Donnie Heinisch. They're both fantastic. in their own respective ways. And so you need to play to those strengths. You can't ask Donovan Heinisch to leverage a 330-pound center. You just can't. Like that is setting your players up for failure. And we saw it. We saw it watching the game on Saturday, right? So I would like to see a little bit more creativity with the personnel groupings. Heard nothing but great things about Armel Mukum. Didn't see him that much on Saturday. And improvement from RJ Oben.
That needs to change, by the way. Armel Mukum not playing as much or not playing, that needs to change in a hurry.
Yep. I heard nothing but great things about him in practice. It sounds like, I mean, from the practices that you've seen,
and he just gives you beef.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole point. He just gives you beef. And now, even if you're going to ask Donovan to do that, take 10, 12 snaps off Donovan's shoulders, and maybe he'll be a little bit quicker in the fourth quarter.
Sure.
Than he was on Saturday. I mean, so.
Yeah, I agree. But the biggest thing that I'm going to be watching for on Saturday is the play of the defensive line. Northern Illinois did a really good job of taking away the strength of the Notre Dame defense, which was the passing game, because they didn't need it. And then when they did need it, Notre Dame was so honed in on the run that Ben Morrison's getting beat by MAC receivers on not routes that are crazy. He wasn't getting burned on double moves. It's just he was flat-footed. He was waiting on the run. You run play action, you boot out Northern Illinois' quarterback, and Ben Morrison's a step behind on an over route. It's nothing crazy.
No.
They didn't do anything mind-blowing, but to me, that's where it starts. And I know Al Golden's philosophy is, well, we're not going to be known for holding teams to 70 yards a game for rushing. It's like, well, that's not what we're asking.
Right.
That's not what the team needs, because you were a great defense last year when you were like 32nd in overall rushing yards per game.
Gave up 119 a game last year.
Yeah, and that's fine, but you had more favorable matchups. Within those stats, you were able to win those matchups, which you haven't been able to do in the second quarter of the Texas A&M game, and really for the bulk of the Northern Illinois game. So D-line play is going to be huge for me. And then to your point, the only other keys that I have, man, are just the come out and play with intensity.
Everywhere.
Yes.
Everywhere. Not just a couple people in the chat. Oh, Xavier Watts played his heart out. Yeah, he did. But it can't just be Jaden Ausberry played his butt off. It can't just be a couple. I thought Christian Gray was a lot better this week than he was the week before. Can't just be a couple guys, though. It's got to be as a unit. This is a unit that needs to take a lot more. I think there was a lot of reading of the press clippings.
Yep.
From some of this group.
Agreed.
And as we said last week, Northern Illinois was not afraid of you. They were not going to be afraid of you, and neither is Purdue. And I'm talking about the defense now as well, Trevor.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's you need to get back to the point where you need to give teams a reason to fear you. And yes, like there's always going to be that. I remember the Northern Illinois coach came out and said, well, they put their pants on the same way that we do, which is a great mentality to have when you're the 4-touchdown underdog going into, a hostile environment to go play. That's the right mindset that you need to have. But what Notre Dame on defense specifically has the opportunity to do this week is remind people, it's like, hey, this is why you should not want to play our defense in any capacity, whether it's in the run game, definitely still not in the pass game. But I don't really think, especially what's happened the last 6 quarters of gameplay for Notre Dame's defense, is I don't think they're going to ask Hudson Card to line up and throw it 37 times. I wouldn't, not if I was Purdue's offensive coordinator. So it's a lot of intensity on the front and the front 7 on defense for me. It's not being afraid to go in and make a mistake, a controlled mistake. I'm not talking about a targeting penalty or a face mask, but don't wait to absorb tackles. Like attack at the point of attack. Like be okay with Notre Dame's defense is fast enough to where if you slow up a running back and swarm the football, but you go in at 110 miles an hour and you get a hand on somebody, I'd be willing to take that than watch Ontario Brown again not get touched for the first 4 yards of his carry until somebody is waiting to give him a bear hug. That's what I would like to see. So D-line play, just overall playing aggressive between the whistles, that's really my two things. Not outside of the D line, nothing crazy schematic. More stunts on the D line for sure. But it's where I'm at.
So, Trevor, before we wrap up, we do have some super chats I want to get to here real quick. We have a super chat from AST12321. Thank you very much for your super chat. I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship with Notre Dame football. I love it so much, and it keeps hurting me, but I keep giving it more chances. That is a great way of putting it, Trevor. And I think we kind of all feel that way at times. It's like, I want to quit you, but I can't. Just the love is too deep.
Yeah. It's like trying to get rid of your first car.
Yeah, I had a hard time with that.
Yeah, me
Very
too.
hard time with that.
Yeah.
I had a car for over 20 years.
Let's go.
Yeah. Michael S. with a super chat. Thank you, Michael. Feel if Notre Dame doesn't come out and dominate with multiple scores, they become frustrated and lose any momentum as game goes on. Your view? No, I don't think it's that. I think that is a byproduct of them just not being locked in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this team, because the other thing is, like, last year, that was not the case. They actually struggled a lot early at times last year and then pulled teams away. I think they just need to come out in more of a rhythm and do more things to kind of get rolling, and not just for the first series, but moving forward. So I definitely think that they lose momentum, but I don't think it's because they don't come out and dominate so they get frustrated. I don't think that's necessarily it. Iden Benami with a super chat. One thing that's giving me hope is it took Dabo 6 years to win his first championship. Also, after seeing and hearing about this analytics guy, very upsetting. Well, Dabo won because he made the move to go to a really talented freshman quarterback back in 2014 and prepare for the future. And, and that guy took his lumps as a freshman, got knocked out for a couple games, came back. In 2015, led his team as a true sophomore, led his team to a national championship berth, and they lost. And then the next year he went out and led them to a national championship. So, that worked out pretty well for Dabo. And the team they beat in 2016 started a true freshman quarterback who led them to the national championship game. So,
Sure did.
If it's your best guy, it's your best guy. Michael S. also says, why is A&M not the anomaly? Offense seems fundamentally lost. I don't know that we ever said any game was an anomaly. Right now, they are who they are.
Mm-hmm.
They were actually worse against Northern Illinois on offense than they were against Texas A&M. Michael S. with another super chat. Thank you, Michael, again. Wouldn't going to the young guys lead to a season disaster like when Weiss went to Clawson in second week his freshman year? No. Not every. Go ahead, Trevor.
I was about to say, first of all, the makeups of the team were completely different.
Way different.
2007, you lost. From that 2006 team, we're talking about you lose Brady Quinn, Darius Walker, Rima McKnight, Jeff Samardzija. On defense, you lose Victor Abiamiri, Derek Landry. You lose.
You also lost three starters on your offensive line.
Right. And the makeup is completely different. Like that. Yeah, you go to a true freshman in Clawson in week 2, but I don't know what year Derek. Oh gosh, what was his name? Derek Anderson? No. What quarterback am I thinking of that started against Georgia Tech?
Demetrius Jones.
Demetrius Jones.
Yeah.
I don't know what year he was, but
this is a redshirt freshman. He was only a year ahead of Jimmy.
So that's a year where that's the situation that you do it, but you're not built to that year, regardless of who you started at quarterback. You didn't have a lot of other supporting roles to come in and say, well, we'll be all right if we start the young guy like you do this year. If Kenny Minchie and Riley Leonard come out or if Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr come out and start for Notre Dame in a couple weeks, that doesn't affect how good the defense still is.
Here's the other thing. If you wouldn't have gone with Jimmy in that year, it would have been even worse. Because and it wasn't the second week, it was the second quarter or half of his first game, because he took over against Georgia Tech. And let's be honest, the only reason Jimmy didn't start the beginning is because he was dealing with bone spurs in his elbow. But it was a completely different situation. Yep. Completely different. That team was an absolute train wreck. And it didn't become I feel like he's saying it became a disaster because they put Jimmy Clawson in the game. That's not at all.
No.
I'm actually going to pull up that box score because that game was over by halftime before Jimmy even came in the game.
Yeah.
and because they had Demetrius Jones and Zach Frazier, and Charlie tried to run an offense that didn't work. They actually went to I think Demetrius Jones went 1 of 3 for 4 yards. Then they put Evan Sharpley in the game. He wasn't the answer, and then they put Jimmy in the game. But they ran for 40. They had 41 carries for -8 yards in that game. So there was a lot of, and they gave up 259 rushing yards to Georgia Tech. They did not lose that game because of Jimmy Clausen, they didn't lose that season because of Jimmy Clausen. They had way more issues. And I would again contend that if you don't go 3-9, if Jimmy Clausen's not your starter, it would have been worse, in my opinion. That's not justifying playing CJ Carr or Kenny this year. It's like you said, Trey, a completely different situation. And Jimmy was also a year older. I mean, he was 19, I think, when he graduated high school. I mean, so it was just a different situation. Last one, God's thumb. Sunday, y'all talked about robotic. Freeman is being the same robotic, turning and asking analytic guy what to do. He's not even being free. Thoughts? I don't disagree. That was just such a weird. The optics of it were so weird. And look, I understand that all coaches have to think through the new timeout, how to use timeouts because of the 2-minute warning. The 2-minute warning adds a different element to how the clock management late in the game. And so basically what Marcus Freeman was asking the guy was, based on analytics, should I call a timeout now and then also have the 2-minute warning, or should I let it run down to 2 minutes and then save my timeouts? My concern is not that he's asking the analytics guy. He should have been freaking asking Mike Denbrock. Mm-hmm. Hey, coach, do you want me to use the timeout here and then we have more time, or do you want, would you rather save the timeout? And Marcus Freeman did confirm they did not have a timeout left. Because when you guys told me that there was a timeout left, I was like floored because I didn't think they had a timeout left. From the stadium, I didn't think they had a timeout left.
Yeah, the entire broadcast was weird. On the graphic on TV, it said that they had a timeout, and the ref, I don't know, like the sit-in referee in New York came in and said this is why they still have a timeout. It was weird.
Yeah, but he didn't think. Now, they may still had a timeout, and he still doesn't realize they had a timeout, but anyway, so the point is that should be Mike Denbrock's call, not some kid you just hired a couple weeks ago who's good with numbers.
Yeah,
like it's like, okay, yeah, it's year one of the news, but that's something you should have spent all summer war rooming with your coaches about. Hey, we get into this situation late in the game. Those are things coaches do. It's like, how are we handling this? How are we handling that? In this situation, Mike, if we get in a situation where we need a field goal drive late in the game, would you rather, use the 2-minute warning, let the clock run all the way down and knowing we save that extra timeout, or would you rather me use a timeout and then use the 2-minute warning? And yeah, you may start the drive with no timeouts, but you've got 35 extra seconds on the clock. Every coach is different. So the Pro Football Focus guy is not who should have been asking that question of. It should have been Mike Denbrock.
100%.
And that's my issue with it. And it's just the aesthetics of it was, it looked like, and he said, he was on the sidelines against A&M too, but he wasn't following you around like a lost puppy the entire game against A&M. And I really feel like a lot of it was because I think I like Marcus Freeman a lot. I do. I respect him a lot. I don't, but I feel like he allows that type of stuff to affect him more than it should. He goes on with that. What's the guy's name? Big Cat or something like that.
Barstool Big Cat. Yeah.
Yeah. He goes on that show, which I do have a beef with that because, like, okay, here's the thought. How about you stop telling us you don't have any desire to come on our shows where you'd get a more receptive audience, but you'll go there and then get into those beefs about analytics. Whatever. Do what you got to do, man. But I feel like things like that kind of impact him a little bit. Like he hears that noise. And then you come out this week, and now the PFF guy's following him around with the analytics book, and it's just like, it's kind of weird. Go with your gut, because here's the thing. Not everyone's going to agree on this stuff. And I don't care what analytics say. Every coach is going to view it differently. You got to go with what you think is best for your football team. And this, like I was on with Mark Rogers last week, and he was asking me a scenario about this. And I said, well, I need to know a lot more context of this particular situation. But at the end of the day, that should be a Mike Denbrock conversation about what your offensive coordinator wants not what the PFF guy wants.
Totally.
Your analytics guy wants. And it just was a bad look, but it just kind of further shows like, I don't know that he's gotten any better at really understanding clock management and proper usage of the timeout situation. Like, I don't think he has a good stop on that. You know?
I don't want to frame this like I'm trying to give Marcus Freeman advice. He's the head coach at Notre Dame, and
that's what we're here for.
Doesn't need my advice. But look, man.
Hey, he could have taken our advice last week when we told them you guys better be prepared for all this stuff from Northern Illinois. Maybe they should have taken our advice last week.
Sure.
Maybe they should have taken my advice when I tell them that PFF is garbage. Just saying.
Where we've seen Marcus Freeman at his best, I don't think that there's any question that he is an authentic person. And I don't think that that's a question, but
never doubted that.
Where he's
a good person.
Absolutely.
Right.
And where he's been at his best is when he is that. Like, I understand having mentors and coaching mentors with, Jim Tressel, and you're meeting with Lou Holtz and you're asking this analytic guy what to do here and what to do here. Like, my advice to him would be stop asking, and I don't know if he is or isn't, but this is just how I'm perceiving this. Stop asking other people how to be Marcus Freeman and just go be Marcus Freeman.
Right.
There's a reason why, the authenticity that he had leading his team out of the tunnel, against Texas A&M. I never saw Jim Tressel do that. That was a Marcus Freeman thing. And then look what happened. Look how your team played for you.
Right.
So that's.
But then you let somebody else kind of dictate how your practice structure is going to go the week after,
and
it didn't work.
Be yourself and trust your gut, which is tough when you're at this position of like you have so many eyes on you. But that's where I have seen Marcus Freeman at his best is when he is being his authentic self and leading the team how he believes it should be led, not what this guy with this experience suggests. Like, this is your coaching staff, man. Like, that's where I think, we talked about it a lot on Saturday night. The buck stops with the head coach, and we have seen that this team will follow in whatever direction that you take them.
Yep.
And that's going to be another thing that I'm looking at. I mean, to bring up the super chat and thank you again for it is, he's not even being free. I agree with that. It's almost like sometimes he's looking for somebody to tell him what to do when I fully believe that I think he knows the answer. He just wants that affirmation that it's correct. So, that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. I would never care about anything that anyone at Big Barstool Sports tells me. And I don't, it's not even a shot at Barstool Sports. I don't really watch or listen to Barstool Sports. I don't even know who that. It's Big Cat, right? I don't know who that is. I don't know why they're going on that show. I have no clue. I mean, and I'm not saying a shot. Like, I don't know if that's like important or not. But like that kind of stuff shouldn't matter to you. I mean, coaches shouldn't care what media people think about things. That's a conversation that is had in the office with Mike Denbrock and with Al Golden. And that's who should be making those decisions. There's always a point in time. Like, look, long before, like, people call it analytics now. I used to call it scouting reports. You know what I mean? Like, it's analytics is now the new cool term for tendencies and scouting reports. And this isn't new, but some of that stuff is when you lean too hard into it to where you're not thinking about the practical applications of it, then you're not like somebody said, 2-point conversions succeed at 50% of the time. So people say, well, if you just go for 2 every time, I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't tell me anything. Is every team in the country at 50%? Well, are you 75% when you do it in the first or second quarter, but you're 25% when you do it in the fourth quarter, game on the line? There's so many other things that factor into it besides just, hey, 50% of the time it does this. It's like, well, okay, but what about this? What kind of defense do you have? What kind of offense do you have? Is your offensive line this? Is your quarterback that? And in that situation, you need to be talking to your offensive coordinator about, hey, man, what do you want here? And then go from there. I personally would have called the timeout earlier, then use the 2-minute clock, because I'm a believer that I would rather have more time and no timeouts than a lot less time and a timeout.
Especially in college.
Right.
Clock stops on first downs.
Right.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was just a bad look. He looked like a coach that wasn't confident in making that decision, and that's an even bigger problem for me.
Totally.
and some guy that's been with you for 5 minutes shouldn't be making that decision. You should have thought about that. That should be determined before the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. So anyway, Trevor, that's gonna do it, man. So I agree, Ryan. I completely agree. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being with us. 5 o'clock tonight, we'll have IB Nation Sports Talk. Trevor will be back with me on Thursday, along with Ryan Roberts. We'll do our prediction show and Keys to Victory show. I'll be here tomorrow for a Notre Dame rundown tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We'll also go live at 1 o'clock. We'll have a mailbag on Friday at 1 o'clock. And, of course, tonight, tomorrow, Thursday night, 5 o'clock, IB Nation Sports Talk. So definitely check all those out. But that's why you need to be subscribed to Irish Breakdown. Make sure you hit that notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review if you are listening via our podcast platform. And, of course, as always, if you've not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Don't be one of those people that's bailing on us because you're mad at Notre Dame. Stick with us, all right, because we're going to keep giving some great content and having some fun with it. And if you've thought about signing up and haven't done it yet, now's the perfect time to do so. So thanks for being with us, everybody. Trevor, great job today. And we will talk to you guys again here very soon. Matter of fact, 1 o'clock tomorrow on the Irish Breakdown podcast.